Welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thrilled you've joined us today and truly appreciate your support. We're curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect. Miles Donovan had built his fortune from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. At 47, he possessed the kind of wealth that allowed him to create intricate financial structures that even the most seasoned Wall Street veterans struggled to comprehend. It wasn't about tax evasion, it was about protection. A lesson his father, a once prosperous contractor who lost everything in a messy divorce, had impressed upon him before drinking himself to death when Miles was only 16. Never put anything in your own name, son, his father had slurred that final night. Not if you want to keep it. Miles had taken that advice and elevated it to an art form. His primary residence, a restored Victorian mansion on 3 acres just outside Boston, was owned by the Donovan Family Trust, which was in turn controlled by Hermes Holdings, an entity registered in the Cayman Islands. Miles maintained ironclad control of Hermes through a complex web of shell companies and proxy directors. To the outside world, he was merely a successful real estate developer. Only his attorney, Floyd Newman, knew the true extent of his financial empire. The irony wasn't lost on Miles. He had designed his financial labyrinth to protect himself from the government, competitors, and lawsuit-happy clients. He never imagined it would one day protect him from his own wife. Vivian had entered his life like a hurricane 6 years ago. He had been 41, she 28. They met at a charity gala, where she was working as an event coordinator. Unlike the society women who typically circled him, Vivian wasn't impressed by his wealth. Or at least, she was skilled at pretending not to be. Another real estate developer, she'd said with a smirk when he introduced himself. How original. Her dismissiveness had been intoxicating. The chase that followed, dinner invitations repeatedly declined, flowers returned, had only intensified his desire. When she finally agreed to a date 3 months later, Miles was already half in love with her. The marriage proposal came 6 months after that. Miles had offered a prenuptial agreement. His attorney insisted, but didn't press the issue when Vivian tearfully expressed how it made her feel like just another business transaction. He had been a fool, blinded by her dark copper hair and cynical smile, but not enough of a fool to put her name on any of his assets. As Miles stared out the window of his private jet returning from Singapore, he scrolled through the surveillance footage on his tablet. The camera hidden in their bedroom light fixture captured it all. Vivian and her lover, Deacon Mercer, the personal trainer she'd hired last year. Miles had suspected for months. The late-night texts, the sudden interest in fitness, the declining of his invitations to join him on business trips, a stark contrast to the early years when she would eagerly accompany him around the world. His suspicions had led him to have Floyd hire a private security firm. They installed hidden cameras throughout the house during a weekend when he took Vivian to New York, supposedly for their anniversary. That was 3 months ago. Miles had been collecting evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment. It wasn't just about the affair. 2 weeks ago, his security team intercepted a series of encrypted messages between Vivian and Deacon. They were planning something that involved Miles' extended trip to Singapore. Mr. Donovan will be landing in Boston in approximately 20 minutes. The pilot's voice interrupted his thoughts. Miles nodded to himself and closed the video feed. He opened another app on his tablet, a secure communication channel to Floyd. "Is everything in place?" he typed. The response came seconds later. "All set. Team standing by. Just say the word." Miles closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 6 years of marriage. 6 years that now seemed like an elaborate con. Well, Vivian was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong man to deceive. "Execute," he typed back to Floyd. Then he powered down his tablet and prepared for landing. Chapter 2. The Conspiracy. 3 months earlier, Vivian Donovan sat across from Deacon Mercer at a quiet table in the back of Whisper Lounge, a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of Boston. They'd been careful, separate arrivals, no physical contact in public, cash payments only. Vivian wore large sunglasses despite the evening hour and had tucked her distinctive copper hair under a black baseball cap. "He's planning another trip," she said quietly, swirling the ice in her vodka tonic. Singapore. At least 2 weeks, possibly 3. Deacon nodded, his face betraying no emotion. At 35, he had the chiseled physique expected of a personal trainer, but his eyes held a calculating intelligence that had initially attracted Vivian. He wasn't just another pretty face with impressive muscles. He had ambition. "Is everything documented like we discussed?" he asked. Vivian nodded. The lawyers confirmed it. "In Massachusetts, if I can prove abandonment and emotional neglect, I can petition for temporary exclusive use of the residence during divorce proceedings. Miles has gone at least 20 days each month. I've been documenting every trip for the past year." What Vivian didn't mention was that it had been Deacon's idea to pursue this strategy. 6 months into their affair, he had casually asked about her financial arrangements with Miles. When she admitted there was no prenuptial agreement, his eyes had lit up with interest. "You realize what that means, right?" he had said. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. Without a prenup, you're entitled to a significant portion of everything acquired during the marriage." From that moment, their relationship had taken on an additional dimension. Lovers, yes, but also conspirators. Deacon had introduced her to Lorna Fitzgerald, a divorce attorney known for her aggressive tactics against wealthy husbands. "What about the deed to the house?" Deacon asked now, keeping his voice low. "Any progress there?" Vivian frowned. "That's the problem. I can't find a copy anywhere in the house. I've searched his home office multiple times. According to public records, the house is owned by something called the Donovan Family Trust. And who controls the trust? I don't know. Miles keeps all his business dealings separate from our personal life. He's secretive." Deacon's jaw tightened briefly. This was a complication. What about his assistant? Patrice? Could you get information from her? Vivian shook her head. "Patrice is completely loyal to Miles. She barely acknowledges my existence when I call his office. We need that information, Viv. Without understanding his financial structure, we're fighting blind." What neither of them knew was that Miles had begun suspecting Vivian's infidelity months ago. The first clue had been a misdirected text message that appeared on his iPad through their shared Apple account. A message clearly not meant for him, though it had been quickly deleted. Then there was the lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne in their bedroom, noticed when he returned unexpectedly early from a trip to Chicago. Miles had not confronted her. Instead, he began his own documentation, quiet modifications to his financial structures, digital surveillance, and background checks on anyone new in Vivian's life, including her suspiciously overqualified personal trainer with a last name that had been changed from Mercado to Mercer 5 years ago. Back at the Whisper Lounge, Vivian leaned forward. "I have another approach. Miles' attorney, Floyd Newman, handles everything. His office would have copies of all the legal documents. Can you get access?" "Not directly, but..." Vivian smiled slightly. "Floyd's assistant, Bethany, has always been friendly to me. I've been cultivating that relationship." She mentioned that Floyd is going on vacation next week. "The Galapagos. Limited internet access." Deacon raised an eyebrow, impressed. "So, while the cat's away..." "Exactly. I'm taking Bethany to lunch tomorrow. I think with the right incentive, she might be willing to help us get copies of some key documents." What Vivian couldn't have known was that Bethany Palmer had worked for Floyd Newman for 15 years. Her friendliness was professional courtesy, nothing more. And her mention of Floyd's upcoming vacation was a deliberate piece of misinformation, part of a counterintelligence strategy developed after Miles first voiced his suspicions to Floyd. Bethany had immediately reported Vivian's lunch invitation to Floyd, who had instructed her to accept and feed Vivian carefully curated information. Every detail would be reported back to Miles. Meanwhile, Miles had authorized the installation of state-of-the-art surveillance equipment throughout their home. Every conversation, every visitor, every search through his papers was captured and analyzed. He watched as Vivian and Deacon's conspiracy unfolded, always 2 steps ahead of their planning. As Vivian and Deacon finished their drinks and prepared to leave separately, Deacon reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand. "Once we have control of the house, everything else will fall into place," he assured her. "Miles will be negotiating from a position of weakness. Trust me." Vivian nodded, her expression determined. 2 more months. Then we make our move during the Singapore trip. Neither of them noticed the man sitting at the bar, apparently focused on a basketball game on the television. Harold Vincetti, retired Boston police detective and current employee of Sentinel Security Services, had been tracking their movements for weeks. As they left, he finished his club soda, left a generous tip, and made a phone call. "Sir, they're still planning to move during the Singapore trip. We got all on audio." On the other end of the line, Floyd Newman smiled. "Excellent. Send me the recording. Mr. Donovan will want to hear this personally." Chapter 3. The Deception. The Singapore business trip was supposed to last 3 weeks, but Miles Donovan had completed his negotiations in just 12 days. The development rights for the luxury condominium project in Singapore's Marina Bay area were secured, contracts signed, and local partners appeased. It was a substantial win for Donovan Development, adding another jewel to his international portfolio. Under normal circumstances, Miles would have extended his stay to explore investment opportunities in neighboring Malaysia or perhaps enjoy a few days of relaxation at the Raffles Hotel, where he maintained a permanent suite. But these are not normal circumstances. In his hotel room, Miles conducted a video call with Floyd Newman and Harold Vincetti from Sentinel Security. "They've accelerated their timeline," Harold explained, his weathered face filling a portion of the screen. "According to our surveillance, they're bringing in the security team tomorrow morning. For men from Bastion Security Services." "Bastion?" Miles raised an eyebrow. "That's Deacon's brother's company." "Correct," Floyd confirmed. "We've looked into it. Bastion is owned by Travis Mercado. Deacon still uses his birth name in business dealings with his brother. They primarily provide nightclub bouncers and event security, but they're branching into executive protection services." Miles nodded thoughtfully. "So Vivian gets to claim she feared for her safety because of my erratic behavior. And, conveniently, her lover's brother provides the muscle to keep me out of my own house." "That appears to be the plan," Harold agreed. "They've been careful to create a paper trail. Vivian has been making calls to a domestic violence hotline from your landline. She's visited the emergency room twice in the past month, complaining of anxiety and insomnia, which she attributed to fear of your unpredictable temper." Miles' expression darkened. "I've never raised my voice to her, let alone my hand." "We know that, sir," Harold said. "But she's building a narrative. She's also been transferring small amounts from your joint account to a private account over the past 6 months. Small enough not to trigger any alerts, but it adds up to about $250,000. The joint account has a $500,000 limit," Miles said dismissively. "It's replenished monthly for household expenses. She's welcome to it." Floyd cleared his throat. "There's more, Miles. Bethany reports that Vivian tried to bribe her for information about your financial holdings. Offered her $50,000 in cash to provide copies of trust documents and offshore account details." Miles leaned back in his chair, a faint smile touching his lips. "And what did our loyal Bethany do?" "Provided her with exactly what we wanted her to have. The altered documents showing that the house is owned directly by Hermes Holdings, with no mention of the intervening trusts or the fact that you personally control Hermes through proxy directors." "Perfect," Miles nodded. "And our countermeasures?" Harold took over again. "Our team will remain in position, but unseen. We have 4 operators stationed in the guest house, monitoring the security feeds. Once Bastion's team is in place, we'll make contact with them privately. As discussed, we'll present the authentic ownership documents and offer them double whatever Vivian is paying. And if they refuse?" "They won't," Harold said confidently. "I've researched Travis Mercado. He's ambitious but practical. When he understands that his security license could be revoked for participating in an illegal lockout, he'll make the business decision." Miles nodded again, satisfied. "I'll be arriving on flight SQ-26, landing at 7:15 p.m. tomorrow. Keep me updated on any developments." After ending the call, Miles stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his suite, gazing out at the Singapore skyline. The Marina Bay Sands complex dominated the view, its 3 towers supporting the famous Sky Park, a feat of engineering and audacity. Miles appreciated audacity. In fact, a part of him admired Vivian's boldness. It was a quality that had attracted him to her initially, but he had no tolerance for betrayal. His phone chimed with a text message from Vivian. "Miss you. When are you coming home?" The corners of his mouth lifted in a cold smile as he typed his response. "Negotiations wrapping up early. Should be home tomorrow evening. Can't wait to see you." He could almost picture her panic as she read his message. The frantic call to Deacon, the rushed adjustment of their plans. They would need to move quickly now, bringing in the security team immediately rather than tomorrow morning. Miles sent another text to Floyd. "Green light. They'll move tonight." Floyd's response was immediate. "Team in position. All contingencies covered." Miles turned back to the Singapore skyline, his reflection superimposed over the glittering cityscape. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Never put anything in your own name, son. Not if you want to keep it." He had built his financial fortress to protect against business risks, never imagining it would serve as a bulwark against marital betrayal. Yet here he was, about to witness the effectiveness of his creation from a new angle. Miles poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25, raised the glass in a silent toast to his late father, and began packing for his journey home. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The private jet touched down at Boston Logan International Airport at 6:43 p.m., 32 minutes ahead of schedule. Miles had slept for most of the 14-hour flight, a skill he'd perfected over years of international business travel. He looked refreshed in his tailored charcoal suit as he descended the steps to the tarmac, where a black Escalade waited. "Welcome back, Mr. Donovan," said Roland, his longtime driver. "Straight home?" "Yes, Roland," Miles replied, sliding into the leatherback seat. "And take the route past Brewer's Pond, would you? I could use the extra few minutes." "Of course, sir." As the Escalade pulled away, Miles checked his phone. 3 text messages from Floyd with updates. Bastion team arrived at 9 a.m. For men, led by Travis Mercado personally. Vivian presented altered documents to them claiming full ownership. "Our team made contact at 2 p.m. Travis agreed to our terms immediately." Miles smiled slightly. The final message had arrived just 30 minutes ago. "All assets in position. Waiting for your arrival to execute final phase." He put his phone away and gazed out the window as the Escalade wound through the affluent suburbs west of Boston. Twilight was settling over the landscape, lights beginning to twinkle in the windows of the stately homes they passed. "Any specific music, sir?" Roland asked. "Wagner, I think. Ride of the Valkyries would be appropriate." As the powerful orchestral piece filled the vehicle, Miles closed his eyes briefly, centering himself for the confrontation to come. When he opened them again, they were turning onto the long, tree-lined drive leading to his estate. The house came into view, a magnificent Victorian restoration with modern additions that preserved its historic character while providing contemporary luxury. Lights blazed from every window, and 4 large men in black uniforms stood at attention near the front entrance. Bastion security, no doubt. The Escalade stopped at the bottom of the circular driveway, just inside the gate. Miles stepped out, straightening his suit jacket. "Wait here, Roland. This shouldn't take long." As Miles approached, the security team moved to form a human barrier in front of the door. The tallest among them, a muscular man with a military-style buzz cut, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't come any further. This is private property." Miles smiled pleasantly. "I'm well aware. It's my private property. I have documentation stating otherwise, sir," the man replied stiffly. "This residence belongs to Mrs. Vivian Donovan, and she has requested that you not be permitted entry." At that moment, the front door opened and Vivian emerged. She was dressed impeccably in a black cocktail dress that Miles recognized. He had purchased it for her in Milan the previous year. Her copper hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was attending a gallery opening rather than orchestrating a marital coup. "Miles," she said, her voice carrying across the distance between them. "You're back early." "Evidently," Miles replied, his tone conversational. "I see you've been busy in my absence." "This isn't your house anymore," Vivian declared, her voice taking on a harder edge. "I've filed for divorce and secured a temporary order for exclusive use of the marital residence, effective immediately." You can collect your personal belongings tomorrow, supervised, between 10 a.m. and noon. Miles made a show of looking around at the security team. And these gentlemen are here to enforce this supposed order. They're here to ensure my safety, Vivian replied. Given your history of intimidation. Miles chuckled softly. That's quite creative, Vivian. Completely fictional, but creative. He turned to the lead security officer. You must be Travis Mercado, Deacon's brother, correct? The man's expression betrayed a flicker of surprise before returning to professional neutrality. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Actually, Travis, Miles countered, I think we should all go inside and discuss this situation like civilized people. Don't you agree? Vivian's voice rose in alarm. Don't let him in. I have the documents. The house belongs to Hermes Holdings, and I have legal authorization to occupy it during our divorce proceedings. Miles nodded. Hermes Holdings. Yes, that's correct. He reached into his inner suit pocket and withdrew a slim leather portfolio. Speaking of documentation, Travis, I believe you've already seen these papers? Travis Mercado's expression remained impassive, but a bead of sweat had formed on his temple despite the cool evening air. What papers? Vivian demanded, starting down the steps toward them. Miles opened the portfolio and handed several documents to Travis, who accepted them with obvious reluctance. These are the authentic ownership records for this property, Miles explained, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. The house is indeed owned by Hermes Holdings, which in turn is owned by the Donovan Family Trust. And as these documents demonstrate conclusively, I am the sole controlling trustee of both entities. Vivian froze halfway down the steps, her confident expression faltering. That's not possible. Hermes Holdings is an offshore company based in the Cayman Islands. Indeed it is, Miles agreed pleasantly. Established by me in 2008, long before we met. The documents you presented to Mr. Mercado earlier today were, shall we say, incomplete. The actual corporate structure is a bit more complex. Miles turned back to Travis. As I believe my security consultant explained to you this afternoon, continuing to prevent me from entering my own property constitutes criminal trespass and could jeopardize your company's security license in Massachusetts. Not to mention potential civil liability. Travis Mercado cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Donovan, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The documentation you provided earlier was insufficient. What? Vivian spat, her composure cracking. You're working for me. I paid you in advance. About that, Miles interjected smoothly. Mr. Mercado and his team have agreed to a change in employment. He nodded toward the gate, where 4 men in dark suits had emerged from unmarked vehicles. My own security team from Sentinel Services will be taking over the protection of the property. Protection from unauthorized occupants. That is, Travis stepped aside, motioning for his team to do the same. Mrs. Donovan, I apologize, but we cannot continue this assignment. Your retainer will be refunded in full. Vivian stood frozen on the steps, her face a mask of disbelief that rapidly transformed into fury. You can't do this. I have a court order. Based on fraudulent claims, Miles countered, ascending the steps. Floyd has already filed an emergency motion to vacate, supported by extensive evidence of your affair with Deacon Mercer and your conspiracy to illegally seize control of property that is demonstrably not part of our marital assets. He reached the top of the steps where Vivian stood, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. Up close, he could see the panic behind her eyes. You're locked out, Miles said softly, echoing the words she had planned to say to him. This is my house now. He smiled coldly. Actually, it always was. Miles, please. Vivian's tone suddenly shifted to pleading. We can talk about this. You don't understand. Understand perfectly, Miles interrupted. You and Deacon have been planning this for months. The emergency room visits, the calls to domestic violence hotlines, the systematic withdrawals from our joint account. It was quite thorough. Vivian's eyes widened. How did you? No. Miles finished for her. I've known about your affair since it began. Every conversation, every plan, every attempt to access my financial records. It's all documented. From inside the house came the sound of raised voices. Moments later, Deacon Mercer was escorted out the front door by two of the Sentinel security officers, looking disheveled and furious. "Travis, what the hell?" Deacon demanded, seeing his brother standing with Miles' team. "Sorry, Deacon," Travis replied stiffly. "Business decision." Miles turned to the Sentinel team leader. "Please escort Mrs. Donovan and Mr. Mercer off the property. They can take one vehicle and any personal items they're currently carrying. Everything else can be arranged through our attorneys." "Miles, you can't just throw me out," Vivian protested, her voice rising hysterically. "Half of everything is mine by law. Half of our marital assets," Miles corrected her. "This house, as you've just learned, is not a marital asset. Neither are most of my business holdings. But we can discuss the division of our IKEA dishware and the Target betting if you'd like." The security team moved forward, flanking Vivian and Deacon. "This isn't over," Deacon snarled. Miles regarded him with cold amusement. "Mr. Mercer, or should I say, Mr. Mercado, for you, it's very much over. Now, please leave my property before I decide to press charges for breaking and entering." As Vivian and Deacon were escorted to her BMW, Miles turned and entered his home. The massive oak door closed behind him with a satisfying thud. Inside, Floyd Newman waited in the foyer, a glass of scotch in hand. He offered it to Miles. "Congratulations," Floyd said. "Phase 1 complete, exactly as planned." Miles accepted the drink and took a sip, savoring the smoky flavor. "Arrange for the locks to be changed tonight, and schedule a deep cleaning for tomorrow." "Already done," Floyd assured him. "The locksmith will be here within the hour, and the cleaning service is booked for 8 a.m. Miles nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. What was her face like when they drove away? Floyd allowed himself a small smile. "Priceless, Miles. Absolutely priceless." Chapter 5. The Aftermath. The morning after the confrontation, Miles sat in his home office reviewing the surveillance footage from the previous night. After he had gone inside, leaving Vivian and Deacon to be escorted off the property, the cameras had captured their departure. Vivian's face was indeed a study in shock, rage, and disbelief as she was forced into the passenger seat of her own BMW, Deacon taking the wheel. Miles paused the footage, zooming in on Vivian's expression. 6 years of marriage, and he had never seen her look so authentic. The carefully maintained facade of sophistication and composure had crumbled completely, revealing the calculating opportunist beneath. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Miles called. Floyd entered, immaculately dressed, as always in a tailored navy suit, bearing a leather portfolio and a tablet. "Morning report," Floyd said, taking a seat across from Miles. "The locks have been changed. Security protocols updated. Sentinel has a 4-man team maintaining perimeter surveillance, rotating in 12-hour shifts." "Excellent," Miles nodded. "Any contact from Vivian or Deacon?" Vivian tried to return at midnight with 2 Boston police officers, claiming domestic violence and illegal eviction. Officers Ramirez and Talbot, both reasonable men. I showed them the property documentation and explained that Mrs. Donovan had attempted to fraudulently seize control of the residence. They advised her to pursue the matter through civil courts. Miles smiled slightly. "Where did they go after leaving here?" "According to our surveillance, they spent the night at the Four Seasons downtown. Room charged to your American Express, naturally." "Of course," Miles said dryly. "Cancel that card. In fact, cancel all cards where she's an authorized user." Floyd made a note on his tablet. "Already done. Also, as instructed, I've had her removed as a beneficiary from your life insurance policies and retirement accounts." "And the joint accounts?" "Frozen as of 9 a.m., Floyd confirmed. "She attempted to withdraw $50,000 from your joint checking account at 8:47 this morning. Request denied." Miles nodded thoughtfully. "She must be getting desperate. What about legal movements?" "Her attorney, Lorna Fitzgerald, filed an emergency motion this morning for temporary spousal support and access to marital funds. Judge Harriman denied it pending a full hearing next week. We've submitted our counterclaims, including the surveillance evidence of the affair and conspiracy." Speaking of evidence, Miles said, "What's the status on Deacon Mercer, or Mercado, rather?" Floyd's expression took on a satisfied quality. This is where it gets interesting. Our investigators have been thorough. Deacon changed his name from Mercado to Mercer 5 years ago, shortly after being released from the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles. Prison. Miles raised an eyebrow. What for? Investment fraud. He posed as a wealth management consultant and siphoned nearly $2 million from clients before being caught. Served 18 months of a 3-year sentence. Miles leaned back in his chair, processing this information. And Vivian knew this? Unknown, Floyd replied. But there's more. Since his release, he's established a pattern. 3 relationships with wealthy, married women in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago. Each followed the same trajectory. He's hired as a personal trainer, initiates an affair, and eventually encourages the woman to seek divorce. In the Chicago case, he actually married the woman after her divorce was finalized. That marriage lasted 8 months, during which he transferred nearly $600,000 from their joint accounts to offshore holdings. A professional, Miles mused. And his brother's security company? Legitimate, as far as we can tell. Travis appears to have distanced himself from Deacon's criminal activities. The company primarily provides bouncers to nightclubs and event security. The Executive Protection Division was only established 6 months ago, around the time Deacon and Vivian began planning their coup, Miles noted. Floyd nodded. It appears Deacon was planning to use this situation to help his brother expand into a new market segment. Family business, Miles said with a hint of irony. What's next from their side? Based on precedent from his previous patterns, Deacon will likely encourage Vivian to pursue aggressive legal action while simultaneously planning an exit strategy. Once he determines that the potential financial gain doesn't justify the effort, he typically disappears. Miles stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the meticulously maintained grounds. The gardeners were pruning the hedges that lined the eastern perimeter of the property. He won't disappear this time, Miles said quietly. Neither of them will. Floyd studied his client carefully. What are you thinking, Miles? Miles turned, his expression calm but determined. Phase 2. It's time to dismantle Mr. Mercado's operation permanently and ensure that Vivian understands the full consequences of her choices. The private investigator has compiled extensive documentation on Deacon's previous frauds, Floyd offered, including victims who never reported to authorities. We could anonymously provide this information to current victims' spouses, law enforcement in multiple jurisdictions, and financial regulators. Do it, Miles decided. But that's just the beginning. I want financial pressure applied immediately. Contact the Four Seasons and any other high-end hotels in Boston. Make it known that neither Vivian nor Deacon are authorized to charge anything to any of my accounts or business entities. They'll need to find alternative accommodations quickly, Floyd observed. Precisely. Where's Vivian's family these days? Her mother was in Arizona, as I recall. Phoenix, Floyd confirmed. Retirement community. Vivian's sister Lorraine is in Seattle with 3 children. Neither has significant financial resources. Miles nodded. Vivian hasn't spoken to her mother in years. Some disagreement over her first marriage. She won't go there. The sister is a possibility, but Vivian would consider it humiliating to show up destitute on Lorraine's doorstep. That leaves Deacon's resources, Floyd noted, which I suspect are more limited than he's led Vivian to believe, Miles said. His type keeps just enough liquid assets for appearances. The rest is either tied up in illiquid investments or doesn't exist at all. A notification chimed on Floyd's tablet. He glanced down, then looked up at Miles with raised eyebrows. It appears Vivian has just retained new counsel. She's dropped Lorna Fitzgerald and hired Garrett Osborne. Miles gave a low whistle. Osborne doesn't come cheap. Starting retainer is $75,000, if memory serves. Correct, Floyd confirmed. Which raises the question, where did she get that kind of money on short notice with her access to your accounts cut off? Maybe Deacon is better funded than we thought, Miles mused. Or perhaps Vivian had a rainy day fund I wasn't aware of. Either way, Osborne is formidable. This is escalating faster than anticipated. Should we adjust our strategy? Floyd asked. Miles considered for a moment, then shook his head. No. If anything, this confirms we're on the right track. Vivian's fighting back harder than I expected, which means she believes there's still something worth fighting for. The divorce settlement, Floyd nodded. Even without the house, Massachusetts law entitles her to a significant portion of assets acquired during the marriage. Assets in my name, Miles clarified, which, as you know, are minimal compared to the holdings of my various corporate entities. He returned to his desk and sat down. Still, she could potentially claim a portion of Donovan Development's increase in value during our marriage. We need to neutralize that angle. Floyd hesitated. There is one option we discussed previously, but you were reluctant to pursue it. Miles met his attorney's gaze. The offshore restructuring. Yes, Floyd confirmed. If executed properly, it would render most of your assets unreachable in a divorce proceeding. The downside is that it would trigger certain reporting requirements and potentially attract regulatory attention. I've always operated within the law, Floyd, Miles reminded him. Complex, yes. Aggressive in tax planning, certainly. But legal. The restructuring would remain legal, Floyd assured him. But it would put you on the radar of agencies that have previously paid little attention to your holdings. Miles tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. What's the timeline? For full implementation? 3 to 4 weeks. But we could begin the process immediately and establish the foundational structure within days. Do it, Miles decided. Full implementation before the first court hearing. I want Vivian to understand that every day she continues this fight, there will be less and less left to fight for. Floyd made a note on his tablet. And the personal items she left behind? Her clothing, jewelry, personal effects? She'll likely file a motion for access. Have everything packed by a professional service, Miles instructed. Inventory every item in the presence of a neutral third party. Store it all in a secure facility under Sentinel supervision. She can access it through proper legal channels. Very thorough, Floyd observed. I learned from my father's mistakes, Miles said quietly. He trusted his wife. He didn't document anything. When she decided she wanted out, she took everything, including his dignity. Floyd nodded, understanding the personal dimension that drove his client's meticulous approach. If I may ask, what's your endgame here, Miles? What do you want when this is all over? Miles leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Vivian chose to betray me. Deacon chose to target me. Both thought I would be an easy mark. The busy, absent husband who could be manipulated and discarded. They need to learn how profoundly they misjudged the situation. And financially, I don't care about the money, Floyd. I can always make more. This is about principle. Vivian will receive exactly what the law requires. No more, no less. And it will be considerably less than she's expecting. Floyd closed his tablet and stood. I'll set everything in motion. The offshore restructuring team is standing by. We'll have initial papers for your signature by this evening. Good, Miles nodded. And Floyd? I want daily surveillance reports on both of them. Every move, every conversation, every transaction. No detail is too small. After Floyd left, Miles turned back to the frozen image on his computer screen. Vivian's face contorted with rage and disbelief as she was escorted off the property. He studied it for a long moment, searching for any flicker of the woman he had thought he married. There was nothing familiar there. Perhaps there never had been. Miles closed the file and opened his email. Dozens of business matters required his attention after 2 weeks abroad. Life continued. Empire building continued. And so did his carefully orchestrated dismantling of the two people who had thought they could take it all away. Chapter 6. The Strategy. 1 week after the confrontation at the mansion, Vivian and Deacon sat in a modest suite at the residence inn in Cambridge. It wasn't the Four Seasons. Those doors had closed to them along with every other luxury hotel in Boston once Miles made his influence known. The sleek modern furnishings and adequate kitchenette were a far cry from the sumptuous surroundings Vivian had grown accustomed to over the past 6 years. This is ridiculous, Vivian fumed, pacing the limited floor space. She was dressed in new clothes, mid-range brands from Nordstrom, not the designer pieces she'd left behind at the mansion. I'm entitled to half of everything, Deacon. Everything. Massachusetts law is clear on this. Deacon sat at the small dining table, his laptop open in front of him. His usual confident demeanor had given way to a tense vigilance over the past week. He ran a hand through his hair, which hadn't been professionally styled since the night they'd been ejected from the mansion. Garrett is working on it. Viv, he said, trying to maintain a reassuring tone. But Miles has clearly been preparing for this for months. The legal structures he's created are complex. I don't care how complex they are. We were married for 6 years. I'm entitled to my share. Deacon eyed her cautiously. He had never seen this side of Vivian, the polished socialite facade completely stripped away, revealing a hardness that both concerned and intrigued him. Garrett says Miles has initiated some kind of offshore restructuring, Deacon explained. He's moving assets beyond the reach of Massachusetts courts. Can he do that? Legally? Deacon sighed. According to Garrett, yes. The transactions themselves are legal. Morally questionable, perhaps, but legal. Many of the assets were already held in complex trust structures before your marriage. Vivian stopped pacing and fixed Deacon with an accusatory stare. You said this would work. You said with no prenup, I'd be entitled to half of everything. Half of the marital assets, Deacon corrected her carefully. But Miles has apparently been very diligent about keeping most of his wealth separate from marital assets. This is your fault, Vivian snapped. Your brilliant plan has left me homeless and cut off financially. The credit cards are canceled. The accounts are frozen. Even my damn gym membership was revoked yesterday. Deacon closed his laptop and stood, moving to intercept her pacing. He placed his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me, Viv. This is a setback, not a defeat. Miles is playing hardball, but so can we. We still have leverage. What leverage? Vivian demanded. He has the house, the money, the business, the high-priced attorneys. What do we have? A slow smile spread across Deacon's face. Information, and the threat of public exposure. Vivian frowned, not following. Exposure of what? The affair? Miles doesn't care about that. He's not running for public office. Not the affair, Deacon said. His business practices. Specifically, certain arrangements with development officials in Southeast Asia that might interest the Department of Justice. Vivian's eyes widened. Are you talking about bribes? Not bribes, Deacon corrected carefully. Consulting fees. Facilitation payments. Miles is too smart for outright bribes. But the lines get blurry in places like Vietnam and Indonesia. American prosecutors tend to take a dim view of such arrangements, regardless of what they're called locally. How do you know about this? Vivian asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Deacon hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I may have looked through some of his files in the home office while you were at your spa appointments. Professional curiosity. What he didn't mention was that searching for leverage in wealthy spouses' business dealings was standard procedure in his particular line of work. Before targeting any potential mark, Deacon conducted thorough research. Miles Donovan had seemed perfect, wealthy, frequently traveling, with a much younger wife who appeared increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage. You went through his files? Vivian's voice rose in disbelief. Without telling me, I was protecting you. Deacon countered smoothly. Plausible deniability. Besides, would you have wanted to know? Vivian considered this, then shook her head. No, probably not. She moved away from him, sitting on the edge of the bed. So what exactly are you suggesting? We blackmail Miles. Not blackmail, Deacon said, using the same careful tone he'd used to distinguish between bribes and consulting fees. Negotiation leverage. We don't want him prosecuted. We want a fair settlement. And you think threatening to expose his business practices will get us that? It's worth trying, Deacon said with a shrug. Miles values his reputation. A public scandal involving foreign corruption allegations would damage his business relationships, even if no charges were ever filed. Vivian was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. What if he calls our bluff? We don't actually have documents, do we? I took photos, Deacon admitted. Not comprehensive, but enough to establish a pattern. Names, dates, amounts, corporate entities that appear to exist solely to process these consulting fees. Enough to justify a closer look by federal authorities. Vivian looked at him with newfound respect and perhaps a touch of wariness. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Before Deacon could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, his expression instantly darkening. "What is it?" Vivian asked. "Travis," Deacon replied, reading the message. "Bastion Security just lost their license to operate in Massachusetts. Effective immediately, pending review of fraudulent practices." "Miles," Vivian whispered. Deacon nodded grimly. "He's going after my brother now. This is getting personal." "It was always personal," Vivian corrected him. "We just didn't realize how personal until now." Deacon's phone buzzed again. Another text from Travis. "Check your email." Now, with a sense of foreboding, Deacon reopened his laptop and pulled up his email. The most recent message had no subject line, just an attachment. The sender was anonymous, but the message content was clear enough. A courtesy copy of what's being sent to authorities in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and Boston tomorrow morning. Deacon opened the attachment. A comprehensive dossier on his activities over the past 5 years, including his name change, his prison sentence, and detailed accounts of his relationships with wealthy women in multiple cities. Financial records, photographs, hotel receipts, text message transcripts, all meticulously organized and annotated. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, scrolling through the document with growing horror. "What is it?" Vivian moved to look over his shoulder. Her gasp told him she understood the implications immediately. "He knows everything," Deacon said quietly. "Everything about me, my past, my pattern." "Your pattern?" Vivian turned to face him, her expression hardening. "What exactly does that mean, Deacon?" He closed the laptop, buying a moment to collect his thoughts. "It means Miles has been investigating me, digging into my background. And what did he find?" Vivian's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "What pattern, Deacon?" Deacon sighed, recognizing that further deception would only make things worse. "I've had relationships with other wealthy women going through divorces. I've helped them navigate the process." "Help them navigate the process," Vivian repeated slowly. "You mean you've done this before? Seduced unhappy wives of rich men and encouraged them to file for divorce." "It wasn't like that with us," Deacon insisted, reaching for her hand. "What we have is real." Vivian pulled her hand away. Was any of it real? Or was I just another mark in your pattern?" Before Deacon could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Travis again. "I need to take this," he said, grateful for the interruption. "It's my brother." Vivian walked to the suite's small window, staring out at the Cambridge skyline, while Deacon spoke in low, urgent tones behind her. Her mind was racing, reevaluating everything she thought she knew about her relationship with Deacon. Had it all been a calculated scheme? The initial flirtation during training sessions, the sympathetic ear when she complained about Miles' frequent absences, the gradual escalation from confidant to lover. She had believed they had a genuine connection, that Deacon saw her as more than just Miles Donovan's trophy wife. Now she wasn't sure what to believe. Damn it! Deacon's explosive exclamation pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see him staring at his phone, his face pale. "What happened?" "Miles happened," Deacon spat. "Travis just got a call from a Massachusetts banking commission. They're auditing all of Bastion's accounts based on allegations of money laundering. His business accounts are frozen." "Can he do that?" Vivian asked incredulously. "Just make a phone call and shut down an entire business?" "Apparently, Miles Donovan can," Deacon replied bitterly. "Travis says Miles' attorney called him directly afterward, offering to resolve the misunderstanding if Travis provides a sworn statement about our plan to take over the house." Vivian sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "He's systematically destroying everything around us. The house, the money, your brother's business. What's next?" Deacon didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his laptop, a new thought clearly troubling him. "We need to move," he said suddenly. "What? Why?" "If Miles has this much information about me, about us, then he knows where we're staying. He could be watching us right now." As if on cue, Deacon's phone chimed with a new email notification. He opened it cautiously. It contained only a photo, a high-resolution image taken that morning of Deacon and Vivian entering the residence inn, time-stamped 8:17 a.m. "We're leaving," Deacon announced, already gathering his laptop and few belongings. "Now." Vivian didn't argue. She quickly packed her new, less expensive clothes into a single suitcase, while Deacon checked out remotely through the hotel's app. "Where are we going?" she asked as they prepared to leave. Deacon paused at the door, meeting her gaze directly for the first time since the revelations about his past. "First, somewhere safe. Then, we fight back." Miles thinks he's won because he has money and connections. But he's underestimating what people will do when they're cornered. Vivian studied him, seeing both the calculated manipulator revealed in Miles' dossier and the man she'd come to depend on over the past year. Whatever his initial motivations, they were in this together now. "What's the plan?" she asked simply. "We use what we have," Deacon replied. "The information about his business practices in Asia. But we don't just threaten to use it. We actually use it. Anonymous tip to the Justice Department. Copy to the SEC. Let Miles deal with federal investigators crawling through his business while we regroup." "That's not negotiation leverage anymore," Vivian pointed out. "That's scorched earth." Deacon nodded grimly. "Miles crossed a line going after my family. This isn't about money anymore. It's about survival." Vivian shouldered her bag, her resolve hardening. "Then let's survive. And make damn sure Miles doesn't." As they slipped out of the residence inn through a service entrance, neither noticed the unobtrusive gray sedan parked across the street. Inside, Harold Vincetti from Sentinel Security photographed their departure, noted the time, and made a phone call. "Mr. Newman? They're on the move." "Yes, sir. We'll maintain surveillance." The game of cat and mouse was entering a new phase. Miles had drawn first blood, but Deacon and Vivian were now ready to strike back with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. Miles, however, was far from finished with his carefully orchestrated plan. The opening moves had gone exactly as anticipated. Now it was time for the middle game, where the true complexity of his strategy would become apparent. Chapter 7. The Counter-Move. Miles Donovan sat in the understated conference room of Newman & Associates, reviewing the latest surveillance report on Vivian and Deacon. After fleeing the residence inn 3 days ago, they had checked into a budget hotel in Somerville under false names, paying cash. They remained there for less than 48 hours before moving again, this time to a short-term rental in Revere secured through an online marketplace. "They're burning through cash quickly," Floyd observed, seated across from Miles. "Our financial analysis suggests Vivian had approximately $120,000 in a private account we weren't previously aware of. Between Garrett Osborne's retainer, hotel expenses, and daily living costs, they've likely gone through at least half of that already." Miles nodded, unsurprised. Vivian was always careful to set something aside. "I actually respected that about her. They've been making frequent trips to public libraries and internet cafes," Floyd continued, "using public computers rather than their own devices. They're afraid we're monitoring their electronics," Miles deduced. "Smart move, albeit too late." "Indeed. We've been able to recreate most of their online activities through our sources. They've been researching offshore corporate structures, particularly in the Cayman Islands and Singapore." Miles smiled faintly. "Looking for weaknesses in my financial armor. Any other significant movements?" Floyd hesitated briefly. "Yes. Yesterday, Deacon spent 3 hours at the Boston Public Library. He accessed the Department of Justice website, specifically pages related to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and whistleblower provisions. So they're considering that angle," Miles mused, betraying no concern. "As expected. You don't seem worried," Floyd noted carefully. "Because I'm not," Miles replied simply. "First, any allegations would be baseless. My international business dealings are complex but entirely legal. Second, even if they managed to trigger an investigation, it would be a minor inconvenience at most. And if they go public with accusations, the press might pick it up, especially given the circumstances." Miles leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "Floyd, how long have you known me?" "Nearly 20 years, the attorney replied. "And in those 20 years, Have you ever known me to leave a significant vulnerability unaddressed? Floyd conceded the point with a slight nod. Never. Exactly. Now, what's the update on our other initiatives? Floyd consulted his tablet. The offshore restructuring is proceeding ahead of schedule. Phase 1 is complete, with the primary assets now secured within the new structure. Personal court filings show that Vivian's attorney has requested an emergency hearing regarding financial support. Judge Harriman has scheduled it for next Tuesday. And our counter motion, filed yesterday. We've requested full financial disclosure from both Vivian and Deacon, including the source of funds for Osborne's retainer, given that all known marital accounts have been frozen. Miles nodded approvingly. That should create some interesting pressure points. What about Travis Mercado? He's cooperating fully, Floyd reported. Provided a sworn affidavit regarding the scheme to take over the house, including text messages between him and his brother discussing the plan. The Banking Commission has conditionally lifted the freeze on Bastion's operational accounts, though the audit continues. Good. He made the right choice, Miles said. And our final contingency? Floyd's expression grew more serious. In place, but he hesitated. Miles, are you certain you want to proceed with that? It's extreme, even given the circumstances. It's insurance, Floyd. Something I hope we won't need to use, but essential to have in place. Miles fixed his attorney with a steady gaze. They try to take everything from me. Not just material possessions, but my home, my legacy. They need to understand that actions of that magnitude have consequences of equal measure. Before Floyd could respond, his assistant Bethany entered after a brief knock. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Newman, but there's a situation requiring immediate attention. What is it, Bethany? Floyd asked. We've just received word from our sources at the Justice Department. An anonymous complaint was filed this morning alleging violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by Donovan Development, specifically regarding projects in Vietnam and Indonesia. Miles and Floyd exchanged looks. They've made their move, Miles said quietly. Sooner than I anticipated. Floyd turned back to Bethany. What's the current status? The complaint has been received by the FCPA unit, but no formal investigation has been opened yet. They're conducting an initial assessment. Thank you, Bethany, Floyd said. Please ask Carlton to join us immediately. After Bethany left, Miles stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. They're desperate, he observed, making accusations without sufficient evidence. But potentially damaging nonetheless, Floyd cautioned. An FCPA investigation, even one that ultimately finds no wrongdoing, can create significant business disruption and reputational damage. Which is precisely why we prepared for this scenario, Miles reminded him. Activate Protocol Firebreak immediately. Floyd nodded and made a call. Carlton, it's time. Initiate Firebreak. Full spectrum, effective immediately. Miles continued staring out the window as Floyd completed the call. Protocol Firebreak was a comprehensive counterintelligence and reputation management system they had developed years ago for just such a contingency. It involved multiple components: legal response teams, media management specialists, financial communication protocols, and, most importantly, activation of carefully cultivated relationships within key regulatory agencies. Carlton confirms all elements are being activated, Floyd reported after ending the call. The DOJ response team is already preparing a detailed rebuttal to any potential allegations. Our regulatory liaisons are being briefed. Excellent, Miles said, turning back from the window. Now, let's discuss next steps. I want to increase the pressure on our friends. They've already lost the house, access to funds, and Deacon's brother's business is compromised, Floyd pointed out. What more leverage do we need? This isn't about leverage anymore, Floyd, Miles said, his voice hardening slightly. This is about consequences. They've escalated by involving federal authorities with false accusations. That crosses a line. Floyd studied his client carefully. In 20 years, he had never seen Miles truly angry. Irritated, yes. Strategically aggressive, certainly, but never consumed by personal animosity. Now, however, he detected something new in Miles' demeanor. a cold fury carefully controlled beneath his composed exterior. "What do you propose?" Floyd asked cautiously. "First, I want a full audit of Vivian's activities over the past year. Financial transactions, communications, travel, everything. She's been planning this for months, which means she's likely made mistakes. Find them." Floyd made a note. "And Deacon, we already know about his criminal past. Now I want details about his victims, the women he's manipulated before. Contact them, discreetly. See if any would be willing to come forward with their experiences." "For a criminal complaint?" Miles shook his head. "Not yet. Information gathering first." "And Floyd? I want to know everything about that private account of Vivian's. Where the money came from, when it was established, whether any of it originated from our joint funds." "You're building a case for financial fraud," Floyd realized. "I'm exploring all options," Miles corrected. "They chose this battlefield. I'm simply ensuring I have the appropriate weapons." A knock at the door announced Carlton Renwick's arrival. The former Justice Department prosecutor, now a partner at a prestigious Washington law firm that specialized in FCPA cases, entered with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to high-stakes legal battles. "Miles," Carlton nodded in greeting. "Firebreak protocols have been initiated. My team is already in contact with the FCPA unit chief, a former colleague of mine. We're positioning this as a malicious complaint filed as leverage in a contentious divorce." "How are they responding?" Miles asked. "Cautiously," Carlton replied. "They're obligated to review all complaints, but the timing and anonymous nature raise red flags for them. I provided them with background on your current situation with your wife and her associate." "Good," Miles nodded. "Timeline. They'll conduct a preliminary review, which typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. However, given the circumstances and the information we've provided, I believe we can expedite a determination of insufficient basis to proceed within 7 to 10 days. "That's not fast enough," Miles said firmly. "I need this resolved before the divorce hearing on Tuesday." Carlton looked skeptical. "Miles, even with my connections, the DOJ has processes." "I understand bureaucratic constraints, Carlton," Miles interrupted. "But I also understand that where there's a will, there's a way. Find the way." Carlton and Floyd exchanged glances before Carlton nodded. "I'll do what I can, but I should note that an unusually rapid dismissal could itself raise questions." "Then ensure the dismissal is both rapid and unquestionable," Miles replied. "The complaint is baseless. The evidence of its malicious intent is clear. Make that reality apparent to your former colleagues." After Carlton left to make the necessary arrangements, Floyd turned to Miles. "There's still the matter of the hearing on Tuesday. Garrett Osborne is good. He'll come prepared to paint you as a vindictive husband using your financial resources to punish Vivian." "Let him try," Miles said dismissively. "We have surveillance evidence of her conspiracy with Deacon, sworn testimony from Travis Mercado about their scheme to seize the house, and documentation of her attempts to access confidential financial records through your assistant." "All true," Floyd acknowledged. "But Osborne will argue that surveillance of your wife without her knowledge demonstrates controlling behavior. He'll claim her actions were those of a desperate woman trying to escape an emotionally abusive relationship." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Is that your assessment of her best strategy?" "It's what I would argue in his position," Floyd admitted. "The facts aren't on their side, so they'll attack your character and methods." Miles considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right, and that gives me an idea." He reached for his phone and made a call. "Harold? Miles Donovan. I need a special surveillance assignment." "Yes, highest priority. I want everything on Garrett Osborne. Personal habits, financial situation, potential conflicts of interest. Particularly any connection to Deacon Mercer or similar clients in the past." After ending the call, Miles noticed Floyd's concerned expression. "Don't worry, Floyd. I'm not planning to blackmail Vivian's attorney. I'm simply gathering information that might explain his unusual willingness to take this case on short notice for a client with limited financial resources. And if you find such a connection, then we'll have additional context for the judge to consider." Miles smiled thinly. "Transparency is important in legal proceedings, wouldn't you agree?" Floyd didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "What's your endgame here, Miles? What does victory look like to you? Miles was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. Victory is Vivian understanding the full consequences of her betrayal. It's Deacon facing justice for his pattern of predatory behavior. It's restoration of what they tried to take from me. Not just material possessions, but peace of mind. The knowledge that my defenses worked. And financially, Vivian will receive exactly what the law requires. No more, no less. But she'll learn that her actions have permanently diminished what that amount would have been had she chosen a different path. Floyd nodded, making a final note on his tablet. I'll have the team work through the weekend preparing for Tuesday's hearing. And Miles? For what it's worth, I think you're handling this remarkably well, considering the circumstances. Miles smiled faintly. My father used to say that revenge is a dish best served cold. He was wrong about many things, but not about that. As Floyd gathered his materials to leave, Miles added one more thing. I want to move forward with the final contingency. Make the necessary arrangements. Floyd paused, his expression troubled. Miles, are you certain? Once initiated, it can't be easily recalled. I'm certain, Miles replied, his voice leaving no room for further discussion. They've shown their hand with the FCPA complaint. It's time to show them the consequences of their choices. After Floyd left, Miles remained in the conference room alone, reviewing the surveillance photos of Vivian and Deacon. 6 months ago, they had begun plotting to take everything from him. Now, they were running from hotel to hotel, their resources dwindling, their options narrowing. And Miles was just getting started. Chapter 8. The Revelation. The shabby one-bedroom apartment in Revere was a far cry from the luxury Vivian had grown accustomed to. The faded wallpaper, outdated furniture, and persistent smell of previous tenants' cooking had initially horrified her. Now, 5 days into their stay, she barely noticed the surroundings. Her focus had narrowed to survival and the increasingly desperate search for leverage against Miles. Anything? She asked, looking up from her laptop as Deacon entered the apartment. He had been out for hours, making calls from various public phones and meeting with potential allies. Deacon shook his head, his expression grim. Nothing good. Our FCPA complaint was rejected by the Justice Department. Insufficient evidence to warrant a formal investigation was the official language. How is that possible? Vivian demanded. You said the evidence we had was compelling. It should have been, Deacon agreed, frustration evident in his voice. But apparently Miles has friends in high places. My contact at the DOJ says the complaint was reviewed and dismissed in record time. Less than 4 days. That never happens. Vivian slumped back in her chair. So Miles wins again. Don't say that, Deacon snapped, more harshly than he'd intended. He softened his tone immediately. We're not done yet, but we need to be realistic about our position. Which is? Vivian asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Deacon sat heavily on the worn couch. Not good. Travis called while I was out. Miles' attorney offered him a deal. Full restoration of Bastion's licenses and business accounts in exchange for detailed testimony about our plan. Vivian's eyes widened. He wouldn't. He already did, Deacon said flatly. Travis chose his business over family loyalty. Can't say I blame him entirely. He has employees who depend on those paychecks. So now Miles has sworn testimony about our plans, Vivian summarized. And we have, what exactly? Deacon didn't immediately answer. His usual confident demeanor had eroded steadily over the past week as Miles' systematic counterattacks had closed off one option after another. We have the hearing on Tuesday, he finally said. Garrett still believes he can secure you temporary support. Based on what? Miles has moved everything offshore. The house isn't a marital asset. My access to all accounts has been cut off. Vivian ran her hands through her hair, which hadn't seen her regular stylist in almost 2 weeks. Face it, Deacon. We're outmatched. No, Deacon insisted, a hint of his former confidence returning. Miles is playing hardball, but so can we. He cares about his reputation. That's a vulnerability. A vulnerability we tried to exploit with the FCPA complaint, which went nowhere, Vivian reminded him. That was just one approach, Deacon countered. There are others. The press, for instance. A scorned wife's story of her controlling, manipulative husband who uses his wealth to punish her for wanting freedom. That narrative has legs, especially in the current climate. Vivian considered this. You think the media would be interested? I know they would, Deacon assured her. I've already had preliminary conversations with a producer at Channel 7. They're very interested in an exclusive interview. And what would I say? That I had an affair and tried to lock my husband out of his own house. Deacon leaned forward intensely. No, you'd say you felt trapped in a controlling relationship. That Miles was often absent, emotionally unavailable. That when you sought comfort elsewhere, he reacted with disproportionate financial punishment and surveillance, using his wealth as a weapon. That's not entirely untrue, Vivian admitted slowly. Exactly. The best narratives contain elements of truth. Miles was absent. He did keep you in the dark about financial matters. He did surveil you without your knowledge. Deacon reached for her hand. This could work, Viv. It could pressure him into a more reasonable settlement offer before his reputation takes a hit. Before Vivian could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. They exchanged alarmed glances. No one knew they were staying here except Travis, who certainly wouldn't be visiting after his betrayal. Are you expecting anyone? Deacon whispered. Vivian shook her head, her heart racing. Had Miles' security team found them again? The knock came again, more insistent this time. Ms. Donovan? Mr. Mercer? Boston Police Department. Please open the door. Deacon moved to the window and carefully peered out. There's a patrol car outside, he confirmed. 2 officers. What do they want? Vivian whispered anxiously. Only one way to find out, Deacon replied, moving to the door. He opened it to reveal 2 uniformed officers, a man and a woman, both with serious expressions. Deacon Mercer? The male officer asked. Yes, Deacon confirmed cautiously. I'm Officer Ramirez. This is Officer Chun. We need to speak with you and Ms. Donovan. What's this regarding? Deacon asked, not moving from the doorway. Sir, we prefer to discuss this inside, Officer Chun said firmly. Reluctantly, Deacon stepped aside to allow them entry. Vivian had risen from her chair, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Ms. Donovan? Officer Ramirez confirmed. Yes, Vivian nodded. What's this about? We're here to inform you that Mr. Deacon Mercer is being investigated for multiple counts of fraud, including allegations of a pattern of targeting wealthy married women and encouraging them to file for divorce while systematically removing assets from joint accounts. Vivian turned to Deacon, whose face had gone pale. What? These are baseless allegations, Deacon said quickly. Obviously orchestrated by Miles Donovan as part of his campaign against Ms. Donovan. Actually, sir, Officer Chun interjected, the complaints originated from Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. 3 separate victims have come forward with remarkably similar accounts of your activities. The Massachusetts Attorney General's office has been cooperating with authorities in those jurisdictions. This is absurd, Deacon protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Officer Ramirez turned to Vivian. Ma'am, we're also here to inform you that your attorney, Garrett Osborne, has withdrawn as your counsel of record as of this morning. What? Why would he do that? Vivian demanded, her mind reeling. We're not privy to that information, Officer Chun replied, but we're required to serve you with these papers. She produced an envelope from her jacket and handed it to Vivian. This is a notice of deposition. You're being called to testify regarding Mr. Mercer's activities and your joint financial dealings over the past year. Vivian accepted the envelope with a trembling hand. Am I being charged with something? Not at this time, Officer Ramirez answered. The investigation is focused on Mr. Mercer's pattern of activity across multiple states. However, I should advise you that your involvement is being reviewed. This is Miles, Deacon said bitterly. He's behind all of this. Sir, these investigations were initiated by complaint from women in 3 different states, Officer Chun repeated. Unless you're suggesting Mr. Donovan somehow orchestrated multiple women to come forward simultaneously in different jurisdictions. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Deacon insisted. He has resources, connections. Mr. Mercer, Officer Ramirez interrupted firmly. At this time, you are not being arrested. However, You are required to make yourself available for questioning. Detective Alvarez from Major Crimes will contact you tomorrow to arrange a formal interview. After the officers left, Vivian turned to Deacon, her expression a mixture of shock and growing suspicion. "What the hell was that?" she demanded. "Multiple women? A pattern?" Deacon ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. "It's Miles, Viv. He's trying to drive a wedge between us. Fabricating evidence. Pressuring my past relationships to make false statements." "Is any of it true?" Vivian pressed, the envelope from the police clutched tightly in her hand. "Have there been other women? Other divorces?" Deacon hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. "No, of course not." Vivian stared at him, really seeing him perhaps for the first time. The charming personal trainer with the too-perfect physique and the conveniently sympathetic ear. The man who had encouraged her dissatisfaction with Miles, who had suggested the possibility of a significant divorce settlement, who had guided her step by step through a plan that now lay in ruins. "You're lying," she said quietly. "The police officers were right, weren't they? This is your pattern. Find a wealthy, unhappy wife. Seduce her. Encourage her to seek divorce. Then what? Drain her accounts once she gets her settlement?" "Vivian, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "No," she cut him off. "For the first time in months, I am thinking clearly." She took a step back from him. "Miles was right about you. About us. This whole thing was a con from the beginning." Deacon's demeanor shifted suddenly, the desperate defensiveness replaced by a cold calculation that Vivian had never seen before. "Fine," he said, his voice hardening. "Yes, there were others. But what difference does it make now? We're in this together, Vivian. Miles has outmaneuvered us at every turn. Our only chance is to stick together and find a new angle." "Why?" Vivian challenged. "So you can move on to your next target once you've bled me dry? How much of my private account have you already transferred to yourself?" Deacon's silence was damning. "Get out," Vivian said, her voice trembling with rage. "Get your things and get out." "Don't be stupid," Deacon snapped. "You need me. The hearing is in 3 days. Without an attorney, without support." "I'll figure it out," Vivian interrupted. "But I want you gone. Now." For a moment, Deacon looked like he might argue further. Then his expression shifted again, a cold smile spreading across his face. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "But fine. Have it your way." He gathered his laptop and a small bag of essentials. At the door, he paused. "When Miles crushes you in court on Tuesday, don't come looking for me." After he left, Vivian sank onto the couch, the police envelope still clutched in her hand. Her mind was racing, reevaluating every moment of her relationship with Deacon in light of this new information. The attentive listener, the gradually increased physical training sessions, the first accidental touch that led to more, the sympathetic conversations about Miles' emotional distance. Had any of it been real? Or had she simply been another mark in a practice con? Her phone chimed with an incoming text. Unknown number. With a sense of foreboding, she opened the message. "Ms. Donovan, this is Floyd Newman. In light of recent developments, Mr. Donovan is willing to discuss settlement terms. If you're interested, please call my office to arrange a meeting. This offer expires at 5 p.m. tomorrow." Vivian stared at the message for a long time. Miles had known all along what Deacon was. Known that their relationship was built on manipulation and deceit. And now, with Deacon exposed and her attorney withdrawn, Miles was offering an olive branch. Or was it a trap? Another move in a game she was clearly losing? Vivian set down the phone without responding and opened the envelope from the police. Inside was indeed a formal notice of deposition, but also a second document that made her breath catch. It was a detailed financial analysis of her private account, the one she thought no one knew about. The analysis showed systematic transfers over the past 3 months. Small amounts moved regularly from her account to an offshore entity registered in Panama. More than $60,000 in total. Transfers she had never authorized. Transfers Deacon must have initiated using her account information. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. Evidence secured from Deacon's laptop. Multiple similar patterns documented with previous victims. Consider your options carefully. Vivian's hands trembled as she set down the document. The full magnitude of her situation was becoming clear. She had been manipulated by Deacon. She had betrayed Miles. She had participated in a scheme to illegally seize property. And now she was alone, without legal representation, facing a divorce hearing in 3 days. For the first time since the confrontation at the mansion, Vivian Donovan began to cry, not from anger or frustration, but from the crushing realization of her own terrible mistakes. Chapter 9. The Resolution. The conference room at Newman & Associates was deliberately intimidating. All polished mahogany and leather chairs, with a sweeping view of Boston Harbor through floor-to-ceiling windows. Vivian sat alone on one side of the massive table, painfully aware of her faded jeans and simple blouse, the best she could manage from her rapidly dwindling wardrobe. Across from her sat Miles, impeccable in a tailored navy suit, flanked by Floyd Newman and a younger attorney she didn't recognize. Miles' expression was unreadable as he studied a document before him, seemingly in no hurry to acknowledge her presence despite the fact that she had been waiting for nearly 10 minutes. Finally, he looked up. His eyes held none of the warmth she remembered from their early years together, but neither did they contain the anger she had expected. Instead, there was something more disturbing, clinical detachment, as if she were a mildly interesting business problem to be solved. "Thank you for coming, Vivian," Miles said, his voice neutral. "I understand yesterday was difficult for you." Vivian straightened in her chair, determined to maintain her dignity despite everything. "You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Finding Deacon's previous victims, getting my attorney to withdraw, even the police showing up exactly when they did." Miles didn't deny it. "I simply accelerated processes that would have happened eventually. Deacon Mercer, or Mercado, rather, has left a trail of victims across the country. It was only a matter of connecting them and providing the evidence to the appropriate authorities." "And my attorney?" Floyd Newman answered this question. "Mr. Osborne withdrew after learning of Mr. Mercer's criminal background and the potential implications for your case. It was his decision, made to protect his professional reputation." Vivian doubted that was the whole story, but she let it pass. "Why am I here, Miles? Your text said you wanted to discuss settlement terms." "Yes," Miles confirmed. "The divorce hearing is Monday. I see no reason to drag this out further." The younger attorney slid a document across the table to Vivian. "This is our proposed settlement agreement. I'd be happy to walk you through the key provisions." Vivian didn't touch the document. "I don't have an attorney anymore. I'm not signing anything without legal representation." "A prudent decision," Miles acknowledged. "We've arranged for independent counsel to review the agreement with you. Barbara Winters is waiting in the adjacent conference room. She's a respected family law attorney with no previous connection to me or my businesses." Vivian was surprised by this concession. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want this agreement to withstand any future challenge," Miles replied simply. "I have no interest in revisiting this matter once it's resolved." Vivian finally reached for the document, scanning the first page. The language was dense legal terminology, but the bottom-line figures caught her attention immediately. $3 million? She asked, looking up in surprise. "Plus the condo in South Beach." "Yes," Miles confirmed. "Paid in a lump sum upon finalization of the divorce, with the South Beach property transferred to your name within 30 days. Vivian was suspicious. After everything that had happened, the affair, the attempt to seize the house, the FCPA complaint, Miles was offering a settlement that appeared genuinely generous. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. Miles almost smiled. "Several, actually. The agreement includes a strict confidentiality clause regarding our marriage and divorce. Any violation results in forfeiture of the entire settlement amount. There's also a non-disparagement provision that prevents you from making any negative statements about me or my businesses to the media or through social media." "That's standard," Vivian noted. "There must be more." "There is," Miles admitted. "The agreement requires your full cooperation with authorities in their investigation of Deacon Mercer's activities. You'll need to provide complete and truthful testimony regarding his methods and actions." "You want me to help you destroy him?" Vivian said flatly. I want you to help his victims seek justice, Miles corrected, including yourself. Vivian was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. And if I refuse? If I decide to fight this in court? Floyd Newman cleared his throat. Ms. Donovan, I believe you should discuss that scenario with independent counsel. But I can tell you that we have substantial evidence regarding your participation in Mr. Mercer's scheme, including recorded conversations planning the takeover of the house and a fraudulent presentation of ownership documents to Bastion Security. You were surveilling me in our home, Vivian said, anger flaring. Yes, Miles acknowledged without apology. After finding evidence of your affair and overhearing a phone conversation that suggested you were planning something more than just a divorce. The surveillance was legal and will be admissible in court. Vivian felt cornered, yet the settlement offer was far more generous than she had expected given the circumstances. Why offer me anything at all? You could crush me in court. We both know it. For the first time, Miles' composure slipped slightly, a flash of genuine emotion crossing his face. Because despite everything, we were married for 6 years. Whatever we became, there was something real at the beginning. The unexpected sentiment caught Vivian off guard. Before she could respond, Miles continued, his business demeanor returning. Additionally, prolonged legal proceedings benefit neither of us. This settlement allows us both to move forward without the distraction and public spectacle of a contentious divorce trial. Vivian looked down at the settlement document again. $3 million was a fraction of Miles' true wealth, but it was still substantial, enough to maintain a comfortable lifestyle indefinitely if managed properly. The South Beach condo was worth at least another $2 million in the current market. What about the house? My personal belongings? Your personal effects have been packed and placed in storage, Floyd explained. Upon signing this agreement, you'll receive access to retrieve them. As for the house is not negotiable, Miles interrupted firmly. It was never a marital asset, and it remains mine. Vivian nodded, not surprised. The house had emotional significance for Miles that went beyond its considerable monetary value. It represented the empire he had built, the security he had created for himself. I'd like to speak with this independent attorney now, Vivian decided, before I make any decisions. Of course, Floyd agreed, standing. I'll escort you to her. As Vivian rose to follow Floyd, Miles spoke again, his voice quiet but clear. One more thing, Vivian, this offer is final. There will be no negotiation, no counterproposals. You accept these terms, or we proceed to court on Monday. Vivian paused, meeting his gaze directly. You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you? From the moment you suspected the affair, you've been orchestrating every move, every reveal, every consequence. Like one of your business strategies. Miles didn't confirm or deny it, but his expression told her everything she needed to know. Goodbye, Miles, she said softly and followed Floyd from the room. 2 hours later, Vivian returned to the main conference room. Barbara Winters, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor, accompanied her. The attorney had thoroughly reviewed the settlement agreement, explaining each provision in detail and openly acknowledging both its generous aspects and its restrictive covenants. My client has made her decision, Barbara announced as they took their seats. Miles and Floyd looked expectantly at Vivian. I accept the terms, Vivian said simply, with one request. The terms are non-negotiable, Miles reminded her. I'm not asking for more money or assets, Vivian clarified. I want 5 minutes alone with you before I sign. Just to talk. Miles considered this for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. After everyone else had left the room, Vivian and Miles sat in silence for a moment, the settlement agreement between them on the table. Why did you marry me? Vivian finally asked. You're thorough, methodical. You must have vetted me before proposing. Did you know about my first marriage? The pattern even then? Miles studied her thoughtfully. I knew your first marriage ended badly. That your ex-husband claimed you married him for his money, though he had considerably less than I do. I didn't see a pattern. I saw a beautiful, intelligent woman who challenged me in ways no one else had. So I genuinely fooled you, Vivian said, with no satisfaction in her voice. Perhaps we fooled each other, Miles suggested. You saw the successful businessman, the lifestyle, the security. I saw the woman I wanted you to be, not who you actually were. Vivian couldn't argue with that assessment. When did you first suspect? About Deacon and me? March, Miles answered. You received a text while we were having dinner. Your expression changed just for a moment, a look I'd never seen before. You said it was your sister, but you angled the phone away as you replied. It seemed insignificant, but it registered. All the way back in March, Vivian marveled. And you never said anything. Just watched and waited. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, Miles explained. At first, I thought it was just an affair. Painful, but not uncommon. When I realized it was something more orchestrated, I adjusted my approach accordingly. Vivian nodded slowly. You know, he was using me too. The police were right. It was his pattern. Find a wealthy, unhappy wife, manipulate her into a divorce, then gradually siphon off her settlement. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was so clever. We all have blind spots, Miles said, without mockery. Mine was believing that the prenuptial agreement was unnecessary because what we had was different. Would a prenup have changed anything? Vivian asked. The house still would have been protected by your trust structure. True, Miles acknowledged. But it would have clearly defined expectations from the beginning. Perhaps that clarity would have prevented all of this. Vivian reached for the settlement agreement and pulled it toward her. I'm sorry, Miles. Not for getting caught, but for who I became. I don't expect you to believe that or care. But I wanted to say it. Miles watched as she picked up the pen. What will you do now? After the divorce is finalized? Start over, Vivian said simply. Somewhere new. Away from Boston. Away from. She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything around them. Away from all of this. And Deacon, Vivian's expression hardened. I'll testify. Everything I know, everything we planned. He deserves whatever consequences come his way. Good. Miles nodded, satisfied. Vivian signed all 3 copies of the agreement. Her signature steady despite the finality of the moment. One last question. The offshore restructuring you initiated when all this began, was that real or just another pressure tactic? Miles smiled slightly. What do you think? I think you moved enough assets to make the threat credible, but not the entire empire. You're too careful to trigger that level of regulatory scrutiny unless absolutely necessary. Very perceptive, Miles acknowledged. You would have made an excellent business partner in another life. Vivian stood, gathering her purse. Goodbye, Miles. I'd say I wish you well, but I think we're beyond such pleasantries. Actually, Miles replied, rising as well. I do wish you well, Vivian. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to bitterness serves no purpose. I've built my life around protecting what's mine. I've succeeded in that. What you do with your future is your own concern. As Vivian reached the door, Miles spoke one final time. Just remember the terms of our agreement. Complete confidentiality. No public statements. No media interviews. Your cooperation with authorities regarding Deacon. Any violation. I know, Vivian interrupted. I forfeit everything. She turned to face him one last time. Don't worry, Miles. I've learned my lesson about underestimating you. I won't make that mistake again. After she left, Floyd returned to the conference room. That went more smoothly than expected, he observed, collecting the signed agreements. She's pragmatic, Miles replied. She recognized her position and made the rational choice. And Mercer? The investigation is proceeding. Miles nodded. Multiple jurisdictions now. The evidence we provided has opened several previously closed cases. He'll face charges in at least 3 states. Consequences, Floyd noted. As you said from the beginning. Yes, Miles agreed. Actions have consequences. Vivian's affair cost her our marriage and most of the financial security she coveted. Her participation in Deacon's scheme cost her any moral standing in the divorce. And Deacon's pattern of predatory behavior will finally cost him his freedom. And for you, Floyd asked, what consequences do you face from all this? Miles was silent for a moment, looking out the Boston skyline where the afternoon sun glinted off the harbor waters. I trusted unwisely, he said finally. The consequence is that I won't make that mistake again. He turned back to Floyd, his expression resolute. Now, let's get back to business. The Singapore development won't manage itself. As they gathered their materials to leave, Floyd observed his client with a mixture of admiration and concern. Miles had navigated the entire crisis with the same methodical precision he applied to his business dealings. He had identified the threat, developed a multi-layered strategy to neutralize it, and executed that strategy flawlessly. Yet something fundamental had changed. The Miles Donovan who had fallen in love with Vivian 6 years ago, the man who had been willing to forego a prenuptial agreement because he believed in the relationship, was gone. In his place stood someone even more formidable, someone who had eliminated what might have been his last vulnerability. Miles caught Floyd watching him and raised an eyebrow inquiringly. "Just thinking," Floyd said, "that you've handled this situation remarkably well." "I simply applied the principle my father taught me," Miles replied. "Never put anything in your own name if you want to keep it, including your trust." With that, he closed his briefcase and strode from the room, already focused on the next challenge, the next opportunity, the next victory. Behind him, in his perfectly ordered wake, lay the ruins of Vivian's schemes and Deacon's manipulations, a testament to the consequences of betraying a man who had built an empire specifically designed to be unassailable. A man who never forgot and never forgave. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Jeremy Gates had always believed in absolutes. Black and white, right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal. These weren't just concepts to him. They were the bedrock upon which he'd built his life, his marriage, and his service to his country. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base in Afghanistan as Jeremy adjusted his scope for the third time. His spotter, Corporal Sam Garrett, lay beside him on the rocky outcrop, scanning the valley below through high-powered binoculars. "Targets moving toward the compound," Sam whispered. "Winds picking up from the southwest." Jeremy's breathing steadied as he'd trained it to do countless times before. 15 years of military service had honed him into something beyond human, a precision instrument of death. His reputation preceded him in every theater of operation. Jeremy Gates never missed, and Jeremy Gates never forgot. Back home in North Carolina, his wife Christina Gates was living a life that would soon shatter Jeremy's world of absolutes. She'd married him when he was just a young Marine, drawn to his intensity and unwavering principles. But 15 years of deployments, missed birthdays, and lonely nights had worn down her patience like water against stone. Christina stood in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, whispering to William Hogan, a successful contractor she'd met at their daughter's school function. What had started as innocent conversations about home renovations had evolved into something that would destroy everything Jeremy held sacred. "Bill, I can't keep doing this," Christina said, glancing toward the stairs where their 12-year-old daughter Leah was supposedly sleeping. "Jeremy comes back in 3 weeks." "Leave him." Bill's voice was smooth, convincing. "You deserve better than a man who's married to his rifle more than his wife." Christina had heard the stories other military wives shared in hushed tones. Jeremy's reputation wasn't limited to his marksmanship. He was known for his absolute intolerance of betrayal. She'd seen what happened to soldiers under his command who'd violated trust. They were transferred, demoted, or worse, simply disappeared from his circle forever. But love, or what she mistook for love, made her reckless. That same night, 8,000 miles away, Jeremy completed his mission with surgical precision. As they packed their gear, Sam noticed something different in his friend's demeanor. "Everything all right, Gate?" Sam used Jeremy's nickname, earned for his ability to close every door on a target. "Just thinking about home," Jeremy replied, his voice carrying an edge that Sam had learned to recognize. It was the same tone Jeremy used before eliminating a high-value target. What Jeremy didn't know was that his neighbor, retired Marine Blake Mendoza, had been keeping an eye on his house as promised. Blake had served under Jeremy in Iraq and owed him his life. He'd noticed the pattern. The same contractor's truck appearing in Jeremy's driveway every Tuesday and Thursday, staying for hours while Jeremy's wife sent Leah to her friend's house. Blake sat in his garage, wrestling with loyalty and duty. He'd taken a bullet mint for Jeremy in Fallujah, and Jeremy had carried him 2 miles to safety under enemy fire. But telling a man like Jeremy about his wife's betrayal, Blake knew it wouldn't just end a marriage. It would end lives. Meanwhile, Christina had grown bolder. She'd started letting Bill stay overnight when Jeremy's deployment was extended. Bill Hogan was everything Jeremy wasn't. Smooth-talking, always present, and completely uninterested in concepts like honor or loyalty. He saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. "We should tell him together," Christina said one evening as Bill poured wine. "Make it clean." Bill laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Clean? Honey, there's nothing clean about this. Your husband is a trained killer who spent his entire adult life in war zones. When he finds out, and he will find out, he's not going to want a conversation." The truth was, Bill had researched Jeremy extensively. He knew about the incident in Syria, where Jeremy had tracked down and eliminated 3 insurgents who'd killed his team medic, not as part of any official mission, but as personal vengeance. The military had covered it up, but the story lived on in whispered conversations among special operations personnel. Young Leah Gates moved through the house like a ghost, understanding more than her parents realized. She'd inherited her father's observational skills and her mother's emotional intelligence. She knew about Bill, knew about the lies, and felt the weight of secrets crushing her small shoulders. At school, she excelled in everything she touched, driven by a desperate need to make her father proud. She learned that her daddy was a hero, that other kids' fathers looked up to him, that he was someone special. The contradiction between that hero and the man her mother was betraying toward her young heart. The first crack in Jeremy's foundation came through an encrypted message from Blake. 3 words, "Need to talk." Jeremy stared at the screen, knowing that Blake would only reach out like this for something serious. Blake wasn't the type for casual check-ins or small talk. As Jeremy prepared for what he thought would be his return to a loving family, Christina was making plans that would set in motion a chain of events leading to destruction. She'd found an apartment, consulted a divorce lawyer, and convinced herself that Jeremy would accept it rationally. She couldn't have been more wrong. The second Jeremy read Blake's message, he felt something cold and familiar settle into his chest. The same feeling he got when acquiring a target. His world of absolutes was about to be tested, and Jeremy Gates had never been a man to compromise on his principles. 5,000 miles away, in a house that had once symbolized everything he fought to protect, the woman who'd sworn to love and honor him was planning the ultimate betrayal. And their daughter, caught in the crossfire, was about to learn that some fathers never forgive and some men never forget. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The Carolina heat hit Jeremy like a wall as he stepped off the transport plane at Fort Bragg. 3 weeks early, thanks to Blake's cryptic message and Jeremy's accumulated leave time. He'd told no one he was coming home. Not Christina, not Leah, not even his commanding officer knew the real reason for his sudden return. Blake Mendoza waited in the parking lot, his weathered face bearing the weight of unwelcome knowledge. The 2 men embraced briefly, military precision even in their personal moments. "How bad is it?" Jeremy asked, settling into Blake's pickup truck. Blake handed him a manila envelope. "Photos, dates, times." "I'm sorry, brother." Jeremy's hands remained steady as he opened the envelope, but Blake could see the change in his eyes, from human warmth to something arctic and calculating. The photos showed Christina and Bill Hogan in various compromising situations, entering and leaving the house, kissing in the driveway. Bill's truck parked overnight when Leah was at sleepovers. "How long?" Jeremy's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. 6 months that I know of. Maybe longer. Jeremy studied each photograph with the same methodical attention he applied to intelligence briefings. "The daughter? She knows. Smart kid, too smart for her own good. I've seen her watching from her bedroom window when they think she's asleep. That last detail hit Jeremy harder than anything else. His princess, his little girl, forced to witness her mother's betrayal and carry that burden alone. Something inside Jeremy's chest began to crystallize into something harder than diamond and infinitely more dangerous. Tell me about him. Blake reached into the glove compartment and produced a second file. William Hogan, 42, divorced twice, owns Hogan Construction, has a reputation for chasing married women. Some rumors about him getting physical with his last ex-wife, but nothing that stuck in court. Jeremy memorized every detail: home address, work schedule, known associates, financial situation. His military training had taught him that intelligence was the foundation of any successful operation. There's something else, Blake said, his voice heavy. Word is, Christina's been telling people you're unstable. PTSD, anger issues, not safe around Leah. Building a case for sole custody. The temperature in the truck seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jeremy's expression never changed, but Blake had seen that look before. Right before Jeremy eliminated a target who'd been selling information to insurgents. She wants to paint me as the villain, Jeremy said, more to himself than to Blake. Make herself the victim. Gate, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking my wife has declared war on everything I am and everything I've built. Jeremy closed the files and handed them back. Wars have consequences. That evening, Jeremy parked down the street from his own house and watched. It was Thursday, and according to Blake's surveillance, that meant Bill would be there. Sure enough, at 7:47 p.m., a silver Toyota Tacoma pulled into his driveway. Through his scope, the same one he'd used to eliminate targets thousands of miles away, Jeremy watched his wife welcome another man into their home. He watched them move through rooms he'd painted, kiss in the kitchen where he'd made breakfast for Leah, disappear into the bedroom where he'd once held Christina through nightmares about his deployments. But it was when he saw Leah's shadow pass by her bedroom window that Jeremy felt something fundamental break inside him. His daughter was home, forced to listen to her mother's betrayal happening downstairs. Jeremy's phone buzzed. A text from Christina, "Miss you, baby. 2 more weeks feels like forever. Leah, send her love." He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Miss you too. Can't wait to be home." The lie tasted like poison, but it was strategically necessary. If Christina knew he was home early, she might accelerate her timeline. Jeremy needed time to plan, to prepare, to ensure that when he moved, it would be decisive and final. Over the next 3 days, Jeremy conducted surveillance with military precision. He learned Bill's routine, mapped his movements, identified his vulnerabilities. He discovered that Bill had a gambling problem, owed money to dangerous people, and had a history of violence against women that was carefully hidden behind lawyers and non-disclosure agreements. More importantly, Jeremy uncovered Christina's plan through careful social engineering, a skill he'd learned in intelligence training. He accessed her email and discovered communications with her divorce attorney. The strategy was exactly what Blake had warned him about. Paint Jeremy as an unstable veteran, claim fear for her and Leah's safety, and seek full custody with restricted visitation. The attorney had even suggested getting a restraining order based on verbal threats that Christina could claim Jeremy had made. It was a complete fabrication, but Jeremy knew how these cases went. The system was designed to err on the side of caution, and a decorated veteran with PTSD claims against him would be presumed guilty until proven innocent. But what cut deepest was finding the emails between Christina and her sister, Rosa Wallace, discussing how to handle Leah during the divorce. "She's daddy's little girl right now," Christina had written, "but she'll understand when she's older. Bill can be a good father figure if we do this right." Jeremy read that email 3 times, each reading increasing his rage. They were planning to replace him, to erase his relationship with his daughter and rebuild her loyalty around their new family structure. That night, Jeremy sat in a hotel room and made a list. Not a list of targets. That would come later. This was a list of everything he'd lost and everything he stood to lose. His marriage, his home, his daughter's respect. his reputation, his future. Then he made a second list. Everyone who had betrayed him and everyone who had enabled that betrayal. Christina's name was at the top, followed by Bill Hogan. But there were others. Christina's sister who had encouraged the affair, the divorce attorney who was helping build false allegations, even some of their mutual friends who had known about the affair and said nothing. Jeremy Gates had spent 15 years protecting people who had never appreciated the sacrifice. He'd killed enemies of his country, saved the lives of his fellow soldiers, and maintained a code of honor that most people couldn't even comprehend. Now, those same people had declared war on him. As he cleaned his service weapon, a ritual that had become meditative over the years, Jeremy felt the cold certainty settle into his bones. This wouldn't be a divorce. This wouldn't be a custody battle. This would be a reckoning. And Jeremy Gates had never lost a war. Chapter 3. The Call to War. Jeremy had been home for exactly 72 hours when his phone rang. The call that would transform him from betrayed husband to predator. The call that would prove to everyone involved that some men should never be pushed beyond their limits. He was sitting in his rental car outside Leah's school, watching her through the fence as she played with her friends during recess. She looked so small, so innocent, carrying the weight of adult secrets on her 12-year-old shoulders. Jeremy had been planning his approach carefully. When to reveal himself, how to extract Leah from the toxic environment Christina had created, how to protect his daughter while dismantling his enemies. The phone's ringtone cut through his thoughts like a blade. Mr. Gates? This is Dr. Sarah Chun from Cape Fear Valley Emergency Department. Your daughter Leah has been brought in with facial injuries. Jeremy's world tilted. What happened? Sir, I need you to come in immediately. Leah has suffered a broken jaw and some dental trauma. The police are here, and there are some circumstances we need to discuss. Jeremy was already moving, engine roaring to life. What circumstances? Where's her mother? Mrs. Gates is here as well. Sir, the injuries appear to be the result of domestic violence. Leah's stepfather. He's not her stepfather. The words came out like ice. I'm her father. There was a pause on the line. Ah, yes, sir. The man she's been living with, William Hogan, allegedly struck her. She's asking for you. Jeremy disconnected the call and drove toward the hospital with the same focused intensity he'd once used to navigate through hostile territory. His mind had shifted into combat mode, processing information and formulating responses with mechanical precision. He arrived at the emergency department and immediately spotted Christina in the waiting area, crying into her phone. Bill Hogan stood beside her, his knuckles showing fresh scrapes, trying to look concerned while his eyes darted toward the exits. Jeremy entered the hospital like death himself. His presence seemed to suck the energy from the room. Other people instinctively moved away from him, sensing something primal and dangerous in his movements. Christina looked up and her face went white. Jeremy? You're not supposed to be back for her. Where is she? Room 4, Christina stammered. But Jeremy, you need to understand. He walked past her without another word. Behind him, he heard Bill's voice, loud enough to be intentionally overheard. This is exactly what I was talking about, Christina. Look at him. That's not normal behavior. Jeremy stopped walking. Blake Mendoza, who had been following Jeremy at a distance, later said that he'd seen men die with less warning than what happened in that moment. Jeremy turned around slowly, his eyes fixed on Bill Hogan with the same expression he'd worn while acquiring targets through his scope. Excuse me. Jeremy's voice was conversational, almost friendly. Bill, emboldened by being in a public place, stepped forward. I said that's not normal behavior. Storming in here like some kind of what? Jeremy moved closer, and despite being surrounded by people, the space around them seemed to become a vacuum of tension. Like some kind of unstable vet with anger issues, Bill finished, clearly pleased with himself for getting the words out. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. Interesting perspective from the man who just broke my daughter's jaw. Now wait, Dr. Chun? Jeremy turned to the emergency room physician who had been approaching. What exactly happened to my daughter? Dr. Chun glanced nervously between Jeremy and Bill. Based on Leah's account and the injury pattern, she was struck in the face with considerable force. She says she was smiling at a waiter during dinner, and Mr. Hogan became angry, stating that her smile belonged to him and that she was being inappropriate. The silence that followed was deafening. Jeremy processed this information with the same methodical approach he used for mission briefings. His 12-year-old daughter had been brutalized by his wife's lover for the crime of smiling at a stranger. Where is she now? Room 4. She's been asking for you specifically. She seems afraid of Mr. Hogan. Jeremy walked toward room 4, leaving Christina and Bill in the waiting area. Behind him, he could hear Christina hissing at Bill. You told me she fell down the stairs. You told me it was an accident. It was an accident. Bill's voice was defensive. She pushed my buttons, you know. She's too friendly with men. It's not appropriate for a girl her age. Jeremy froze outside room 4, his hand on the door handle. His daughter was too friendly with men. Leah was 12 years old, and this monster was sexualizing her natural childhood behavior. Inside the room, Leah lay on the hospital bed, her face swollen and bruised, her jaw wired shut. When she saw Jeremy, tears immediately started flowing. Daddy. Her voice was muffled by the medical equipment, but the relief in her eyes was unmistakable. Jeremy sat beside her bed and took her small hand in his. I'm here, princess. Daddy's here. He said the smile belonged to him. She whispered, but I was just being polite to the waiter like you taught me. Something inside Jeremy's chest turned to molten steel. His daughter was apologizing for being polite. She was explaining herself to him as if she'd done something wrong by being kind to a stranger. You did nothing wrong, Jeremy said, his voice gentle despite the rage building inside him. Nothing at all. You're perfect, and Daddy is going to fix this. Leah squeezed his hand. Are you going to leave again? No, baby. Daddy's not going anywhere. A nurse entered to check Leah's vitals, and Jeremy stepped into the hallway to make a phone call. He dialed Blake's number. Blake, I need you to listen carefully. I want you to go to my house and wait for me there. If Christina and that piece of garbage come home, you watch them. You don't interfere, but you watch everything. Gate, what are you planning? Jeremy looked through the window at his broken daughter. I'm planning to teach some people about consequences. He hung up and called his commanding officer, Colonel Spencer Cooper. Cooper, sir, it's Gates. I need emergency family leave extended indefinitely. There's been an incident. What kind of incident? My daughter's in the hospital. Domestic violence. I need to handle some things. There was a pause. Colonel Cooper had served with Jeremy for 8 years and knew him better than most. Jeremy, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking about being a father, sir. That's all. The kind of thinking that keeps you out of prison, Jeremy. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. But as Jeremy hung up the phone and looked back at his daughter, he knew that Colonel Cooper's warning had come too late. The moment Bill Hogan had put his hands on Leah, he'd declared war on the wrong man. Jeremy Gates had spent 15 years learning how to wage war in foreign countries against foreign enemies. Now he was going to bring those skills home. And unlike his enemies overseas, Christina and Bill would never see him coming. Chapter 4. Reconnaissance and Rage. Jeremy spent the night in Leah's hospital room, watching her sleep fitfully despite the pain medication. Every small whimper, every unconscious wince sent fresh waves of rage through his system. By morning, he had mentally cataloged every detail of her injuries and begun constructing a detailed plan for retribution. Dr. Chun arrived for morning rounds, followed closely by Detective Rosa Wallace, ironically, Christina's sister, who had been assigned to the domestic violence case. The family connection created an immediate conflict of interest that Jeremy noted for future exploitation. Mr. Gates, Detective Wallace began, her voice carefully professional despite the obvious discomfort. I need to get your statement about the incident. My statement is simple, Jeremy replied, never taking his eyes off Leah. A grown man broke my 12-year-old daughter's jaw because she smiled at a stranger. What's your plan to address that? Well, we've spoken with Mr. Hogan, and he claims it was an accident. He says Leah fell down some stairs and... Detective Wallace. Jeremy finally looked at her, and she took an involuntary step backward. Are you telling me that you believe a 12-year-old girl fell downstairs and somehow managed to break her jaw in a pattern consistent with being punched by a right-handed adult male. Dr. Chun cleared her throat. The injury pattern is definitely consistent with blunt force trauma, not a fall. The angle and severity suggest deliberate violence. Detective Wallace shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hogan is claiming that Leah has behavioral problems, that she's been acting out since learning about the divorce, and that. Stop talking. Jeremy's voice carried the kind of authority that had commanded troops in combat zones. My daughter is lying in a hospital bed with a broken jaw, and you're standing here repeating the lies of the man who put her there. I want to know what charges you're filing and when you're filing them. Sir, these cases are complicated, with the divorce proceedings and the custody situation. This isn't a custody situation. This is an assault on a child. File charges or get out of my daughter's room. After Detective Wallace left, promising to continue the investigation, Jeremy called Sam Garrett, his former spotter who now worked private security in Charlotte. Sam, I need a favor. Deep background check on William Hogan. I want everything: criminal history, civil suits, financial records, medical records, employment history, everything. Gate, what are you planning? I'm planning to be very thorough. Within 6 hours, Sam had delivered a comprehensive dossier on Bill Hogan that painted the picture of a predator who had been carefully managing his public image. 3 previous domestic violence complaints, all mysteriously dropped when the women involved received sudden financial settlements. A sealed juvenile record that Sam's contacts suggested involved sexual misconduct. Significant gambling debts to some very dangerous people in Charlotte. But the most interesting discovery was Bill's business relationship with City Council member Arthur Norris, who had been steering municipal contracts toward Hogan Construction in exchange for cash payments. The arrangement was documented in emails that Sam's cybersecurity contact had acquired through methods Jeremy didn't need to know about. Jeremy studied the information while sitting beside Leah's bed. His daughter was awake now, sipping liquid nutrition through a straw, her eyes following his every movement. Daddy, what are you reading? Just some work stuff, princess. How are you feeling? It hurts, but... Daddy, I heard Mommy talking to Bill. They're saying you're going to be in trouble, that you might not be allowed to see me anymore. Jeremy set down the papers and gave Leah his full attention. What exactly did you hear? They said you have anger problems from the war, and that the judge would keep me away from you for my own safety. Bill said he was going to be my new daddy and that I needed to get used to it. Jeremy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. They weren't just destroying his marriage. They were actively working to erase him from his daughter's life. Leah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that? She nodded. Daddy is going to fix this situation. While I'm fixing it, you might hear some things about me that aren't true. People might tell you that Daddy is dangerous or that Daddy has done bad things. Do you understand that sometimes people lie to get what they want? Like how Bill lied about me falling down the stairs. Exactly like that. No matter what anyone tells you, remember that Daddy loves you more than anything in the world, and everything Daddy does is to protect you. Can you remember that? Yes, Daddy. Good girl. Now, I need you to be very brave for a few more days. Can you do that for me? That evening, Jeremy met Blake at a diner outside of town. Blake had been conducting his own surveillance and had troubling news to report. They're moving fast, Blake said, sliding photographs across the table. Christina met with her lawyer this morning, and they filed emergency custody papers this afternoon. They're claiming you made threatening statements at the hospital. Jeremy examined the legal documents Blake had somehow acquired. The petition painted him as an unstable veteran who had stormed into the hospital in a threatening manner and intimidated hospital staff and law enforcement. It requested immediate sole custody for Christina and supervised visitation only for Jeremy. There's more, Blake continued. I followed Bill to a meeting with Arthur Norris. They're planning something big, some kind of development deal that would make them both rich. But they need clean records to qualify for federal funding. Jeremy looked up from the papers. Meaning Bill can't have a domestic violence conviction on his record when the federal grants are processed. So they're going to make this whole thing disappear by painting you as the threat. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place. Bill hadn't just hurt Leah out of anger. He'd done it because he felt entitled to control Jeremy's family. And now, instead of facing consequences, he was using his connections to turn Jeremy into the villain. Blake, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Tomorrow morning, Christina is going to get a phone call. A very specific phone call that's going to change everything. What kind of call? Jeremy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The kind that reminds her that she married a man who never leaves his battles unfinished. As they left the diner, Jeremy felt the familiar sensation of shifting into operational mode. For 15 years, he'd been a protector, following rules of engagement and working within the system. But the system had failed his daughter, and now Jeremy was going to operate outside its boundaries. Bill Hogan and Christina Gates had declared war on the wrong man. They'd hurt the only person in the world that Jeremy Gates loved more than his own life. Now they were going to learn what happened when you made an enemy of someone who had spent 15 years perfecting the art of destroying enemies. Chapter 5. Gathering the Pack. Jeremy stood in his empty house for the first time since his deployment, seeing it through new eyes. Christina had already begun removing their joint possessions, boxing up anything that connected her to their shared life. Pictures of their wedding were gone, replaced by empty spots on the walls that looked like wounds. But she'd left behind Jeremy's things, his military commendations, his photographs from overseas, Leah's artwork from elementary school. Whether through oversight or spite, she created a shrine to everything she was trying to erase. Blake emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 beers. She cleaned out the joint account yesterday. Left you with about $300. Smart move, Jeremy said, genuinely impressed by the tactical thinking. Cut off my resources. Make it harder for me to fight the custody battle. Gate, maybe it's time to think about playing this straight. Get a good lawyer. Fight this in court. Blake. Jeremy's voice carried a warning. They broke my daughter's jaw and are now trying to paint me as the threat. The legal system is designed to protect people like Bill, connected, white, successful businessman versus scary veteran with PTSD claims. You know how this ends. Blake knew Jeremy was right. He'd seen too many good soldiers destroyed by family courts that didn't understand military life. So what's the plan? The plan is to remind everyone involved that I have skills they don't teach in law school. Jeremy's phone rang. Sam Garrett's name appeared on the screen. Gate, you need to hear this. I've been monitoring Bill's communications like you asked. He just called someone named Jean Mays, apparently a fixer who handles problems for wealthy clients. They're planning to escalate things. Define escalate. They want to provoke you into doing something violent, get you arrested, maybe even committed for psychological evaluation. Mays specializes in manufacturing evidence of instability in divorce cases. Jeremy felt a cold smile cross his face. They want to see unstable? Tell me more about this Jean Mays. Former cop, kicked off the force for excessive force complaints. Now, he runs a private security firm that's really just a cover for intimidation and evidence manufacturing. Word is he's got judges and social workers on his payroll. Sam, I need you to come down here. Bring Wendell and Mike if they're available. The whole old squad? Gate, what are you planning? I'm planning to show these people what happens when civilians try to play war games with actual warriors. By evening, Jeremy's house had been transformed into a tactical operations center. Sam Garrett arrived first, followed by Wendell Bates and Mike Eakin, all former members of Jeremy's unit who now worked various private sector jobs. Each man brought skills that would prove invaluable in the coming operation. Gentlemen, Jeremy began, laying out photographs and documents on his dining room table, I'm calling in every favor, every debt, every bond of brotherhood we've built over 15 years of service together. He explained the situation methodically, showing them the medical reports from Leah's injuries, the custody documents, and the intelligence Sam had gathered on Bill and his associates. This isn't about revenge, Jeremy continued. This is about protecting my daughter and ensuring that the people who hurt her face appropriate consequences. Wendell, a former military intelligence officer, studied the documents carefully. Gate, this Jean Mays character is connected. Taking him on means taking on some powerful people. Then we take on powerful people. Mike, their former demolitions expert, was examining building blueprints that Sam had somehow acquired. If we're doing this, we do it right. No half measures, no leaving loose ends. Agreed. Sam, what do we know about Bill's financial situation? He's leveraged to the teeth. The city contracts from Arthur Norris are the only thing keeping him afloat. He's got gambling debts to Hubert Brock's organization, about 200 grand. Jeremy nodded. Hubert Brock ran the most efficient criminal organization in the region, known for their business-like approach to debt collection. Wendell, I need you to dig into Arthur Norris. Find out how deep his corruption goes and who else might be involved. Mike, I want you to examine Bill's construction sites. Look for safety violations, environmental issues, anything that could shut him down. What about the immediate threat? Blake asked. They're planning to provoke you into an incident. Then we give them an incident, but not the one they're expecting. Jeremy pulled out his laptop and began typing. I'm going to tell you all something that doesn't leave this room. During my last deployment, I discovered evidence of weapons trafficking by a private contractor named Jeff Blackburn. The evidence was classified, but copies exist in secure locations. The room went quiet. They all understood the implications. Blackburn has been selling American weapons to insurgent groups for 3 years. I've been holding that evidence as insurance, waiting for the right moment to use it. That moment is now. Gate, that's treason-level stuff. You could bring down half the defense establishment. I could, but I'm not interested in bringing down half the defense establishment. I'm interested in bringing down the people who hurt my daughter. Jeremy opened a secure communication channel and began typing a message. Jeff Blackburn has connections to Gene Mays through a private military contractor network. When Blackburn's activities become public, Mays will be implicated as well. The investigation will tie up both of them for years. And Bill is going to discover that his gambling debts have been sold to a very impatient creditor. He's also going to learn that his city contracts are being investigated for bid rigging. And Arthur Norris is going to find out that his tax returns for the past 5 years are being audited by both the IRS and the state. Sam whistled softly. Gate, you're not just destroying them. You're destroying their entire network. That's the point. These people hurt my daughter because they thought they could act without consequences. They're going to learn that every action has consequences, and some consequences last forever. Blake looked troubled. What about Christina? She's still Leah's mother. Jeremy's expression hardened. Christina made her choice when she allowed a violent man around my daughter. She chose him over Leah's safety, and now she's choosing him over Leah's relationship with her father. Those choices have consequences too. You're talking about destroying your daughter's mother. I'm talking about protecting my daughter from people who have already proven they'll hurt her to get what they want. The room fell silent as the magnitude of Jeremy's plan became clear. This wasn't just about revenge or even justice. This was about total warfare against everyone who had participated in the betrayal and assault on his family. Gentlemen, you have 24 hours to decide if you're in or out. If you're out, no hard feelings, but you never heard this conversation. If you're in, we move fast and we move hard, and we don't stop until every threat to my daughter has been eliminated. One by one, each man nodded his agreement. They followed Jeremy through Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. They'd trusted him with their lives in foreign wars against foreign enemies. Now, they were going to trust him in a domestic war against domestic enemies. And Jeremy Gates had never lost a war. Chapter 6. The Trap is Set. The next morning, Jeremy sat in his car outside Leah's school, watching through binoculars as Christina and Bill dropped her off. His daughter moved carefully, her jaw still wired shut, but she managed a small wave when she spotted his vehicle. That simple gesture strengthened his resolve and confirmed that everything he was about to set in motion was necessary. His phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Packages delivered. Blackburn is already panicking. Phase 1 had begun. Jeremy had spent the night crafting a series of anonymous tips to various federal agencies, each containing carefully curated portions of Jeff Blackburn's illegal weapons sales. By dawn, Blackburn's offices were being raided by ATF agents, and the ripple effects were already reaching Gene Mays and his network of corrupt officials. Mike's voice came through Jeremy's earpiece. Spotted 2 vehicles conducting surveillance on your house. Professional setup, multiple occupants. They're planning something. Good. Let them plan. Wendell, what's the status on Arthur Norris? Wendell's voice crackled through the secure channel. IRS audit initiated this morning. State corruption investigators received a comprehensive package about his contract steering. He's about to have a very bad week. Sam, how's our friend Bill handling his financial difficulties? Hubert Brock's people paid him a visit at his construction site about an hour ago. Seems someone informed them that Bill had been bragging about not needing to pay his debts because he was about to come into serious money through marriage. Jeremy smiled coldly. Gambling organizations didn't appreciate being treated as optional expenses. Blake, status on Christina? She's meeting with her lawyer right now. Seems very agitated about something. What Christina didn't know was that her sister, Detective Rosa Wallace, had been suspended pending an internal affairs investigation into her handling of domestic violence cases. Wendell had discovered that Rosa had been systematically downgrading domestic violence charges in exchange for financial considerations from defense attorneys. The carefully constructed network that Christina and Bill had relied upon was collapsing faster than they could adapt. Jeremy's phone rang. The caller ID showed Christina's number. Hello, Christina. Jeremy, what the hell is going on? Her voice was high with panic. Rosa got suspended this morning. Bill's being harassed by some criminals, and my lawyer says there are irregularities with our custody filing. I wouldn't know anything about that. I've been focused on our daughter's recovery. Don't play dumb with me. I know you're behind this somehow. Christina, I'm a simple soldier who's been deployed for the past 8 months. I don't have the connections or resources to orchestrate whatever problems you're experiencing. Bill says you have connections. Military people who do dirty work. Jeremy let the silence stretch before responding. Bill seems to know a lot about my capabilities for someone who's never served his country. Maybe you should spend less time talking about my connections and more time worrying about his own problems. Jeremy, please. We can work this out. We can share custody, work together for Leah's sake. Christina, 3 days ago you filed papers claiming I was a dangerous, unstable veteran who shouldn't be allowed near our daughter. Today you want to work together. What changed? Bill convinced me to file those papers. I was scared and confused. Scared of what, Christina? Of me, or of the consequences of your choices? Jeremy could hear her crying on the other end of the line. A part of him, a rapidly diminishing part, felt something like sympathy. But then he remembered Leah's broken jaw and the absolute terror in her eyes when she'd asked if he was going to leave again. Christina, let me explain something to you. For 15 years, I've killed people who threatened American families. I've eliminated threats to innocent children in countries you can't pronounce. I've hunted down and destroyed people who hurt the defenseless. Jeremy, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because you allowed a violent man to hurt my daughter, and then you tried to use the legal system to prevent me from protecting her. You declared war on the one person in this world who would die before letting anyone hurt Leah. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Multiple choices. And now you're experiencing the consequences of those choices. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that this ends one of two ways. Either you voluntarily surrender full custody of Leah to me and disappear from our lives, or I destroy every person who has enabled this situation and ensure that you spend the rest of your life regretting the day you decided to betray your family. I can't just give up my daughter. Your daughter is in the hospital with a broken jaw because of the man you chose over her safety. You've already given her up, Christina. I'm just making it official. Jeremy hung up the phone and immediately called Wendell. Wendell, accelerate the timeline on Arthur Norris. I want him arrested today. Already in motion. Turns out he's been skimming from federal infrastructure grants. FBI is very interested in having a conversation with him. Sam, what's Jean May's status? Blackburn is apparently singing like a canary to save his own skin. May's operation is about to be exposed in federal court. He won't be manufacturing evidence for anyone for a very long time. Jeremy felt the familiar satisfaction of a well-executed operation. Every piece was falling into place exactly as planned. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. BH. Jeremy stared at the message for a moment, then forwarded it to his entire team with a single-word response. Finally, Bill Hogan had just made the critical error that Jeremy had been waiting for, a direct threat that could be documented and used against him. Mike, I need you to pay a visit to our friend Bill. Nothing violent, just a conversation between two men about appropriate boundaries. What kind of conversation? The kind where you explain to him that threatening the father of a child he assaulted is not a wise course of action. Copy that. Should I mention your military background? No need. I have a feeling he's about to learn about it firsthand. Because while Jeremy had been systematically dismantling the support network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah, he had also been preparing for the possibility that Bill might escalate to direct confrontation. And Jeremy Gates had been hoping he would. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Bill Hogan was not a smart man, but he was a proud one, and pride made him dangerous in the way that cornered animals become dangerous. As his world collapsed around him, gambling debts being called in, city contracts under federal investigation, his political connections distancing themselves from him, he made the mistake that Jeremy had been anticipating. He decided to take direct action against Jeremy. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening as Jeremy was leaving the hospital after visiting Leah. The doctors had said she could go home the next day, but only to a safe environment. Christina had already lost her bid for emergency custody when Detective Rosa Wallace's suspension became public knowledge, calling into question all of her previous case decisions. Jeremy was walking to his car when he noticed them, 3 men positioned strategically in the parking lot. Professional setup, multiple escape routes designed to box him in. He recognized the tactics immediately. Paramilitary contractors, probably Gene May's people, though Mays himself was currently in federal custody. Bill Hogan stepped out from behind a van, flanked by 2 large men Jeremy didn't recognize. Time for a conversation, soldier boy. Jeremy stopped walking and calmly assessed the situation. 3 opponents, all armed based on their clothing profiles, confined space with limited visibility. Classic ambush scenario. Bill, I was wondering when you'd work up the courage for a face-to-face meeting. You've been busy, haven't you? Destroying everything I've built, turning my business partners against me. I've been a concerned father dealing with a man who assaulted my daughter. Everything else is just coincidence. Bill laughed, but there was no humor in it. Coincidence? Arthur Norris gets arrested the same day my gambling debts get called in. Gene Mays gets raided the same day your wife's sister gets suspended. You think I'm stupid? I think you're a lot of things, Bill. Stupid is just one of them. Jeremy noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Blake and Sam were positioning themselves behind the hospital's emergency vehicles, having followed Jeremy as planned. Mike and Wendell were approaching from the opposite direction. Here's what's going to happen, Bill continued, his voice gaining confidence from his apparent numerical advantage. You're going to back off. Drop whatever charges you think you can file. Stop interfering with my business, and accept that Christina and Leah are part of my family now. And if I don't, then you're going to have an accident. A tragic accident involving a mentally unstable veteran who couldn't handle the stress of civilian life. Jeremy nodded thoughtfully. So you're threatening to kill me? I'm explaining your options. I appreciate the clarity. It makes what happens next much easier to justify. Jeremy's phone was in his hand, recording everything. But more importantly, Blake was recording from multiple angles, and Sam was broadcasting the conversation to his contacts in federal law enforcement. You see, Bill, you just made a critical tactical error. You brought this confrontation to a location with multiple witnesses, security cameras, and federal agents who are very interested in your activities. Bill's confidence wavered slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Jeff Blackburn finished his cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors this morning. He provided them with detailed information about Gene May's operation, including the names of everyone who's used May's services to manufacture evidence or intimidate witnesses. The color drained from Bill's face. Oh, and Arthur Norris? He's also been very cooperative with investigators. Seems he kept detailed records of all his corrupt dealings, including payments made on your behalf to various city officials. Jeremy took a step forward, and Bill's companions instinctively reached for their weapons. I wouldn't. Jeremy said calmly. The parking lot is currently surrounded by federal agents who are very excited about the possibility of adding weapons charges to your growing list of federal felonies. As if summoned by his words, men in FBI windbreakers began emerging from vehicles throughout the parking lot. What Bill had thought was an isolated confrontation had actually been a carefully orchestrated trap. You see, Bill, while you were planning this little meeting, I was working with federal prosecutors to ensure that your threats against me were properly documented. Threatening a witness in a federal investigation is a serious crime. Agent Spencer Cooper, Jeremy's former commanding officer, now working as a federal liaison, approached the group with a team of armed agents. William Hogan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit witness intimidation, assault on a minor, and about 15 other federal charges that we'll discuss downtown. As Bill was handcuffed, Jeremy leaned in close enough to whisper in his ear. Remember what I told you about consequences, Bill? Every action has consequences. You hurt my daughter, and now you get to spend the next 20 years learning about accountability. Bill's companions were also arrested, though they would likely cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. The criminal network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah was being systematically dismantled by federal law enforcement. Jeremy, Agent Cooper said after the arrests were complete, we're going to need your formal statement about the threats made tonight. Of course, should I mention that Mr. Hogan also confessed to assaulting my daughter during his threatening rant? That would be helpful for the prosecutors, yes. As Jeremy watched Bill being loaded into a federal transport vehicle, he felt a deep satisfaction. This wasn't just justice. This was military precision justice, executed with the same thoroughness he'd once applied to eliminating enemy targets. His phone rang. Christina's number. Jeremy, I just saw the news. Bill's been arrested. Federal charges, Christina. Multiple felonies. He's not getting out on bail. I didn't know about any of it. I thought he was just a successful businessman. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Because Bill was just the beginning. Everyone who enabled this situation, everyone who helped create the circumstances that led to Leah being hurt, is going to face consequences. Including me? Jeremy looked up at the hospital window where his daughter was sleeping, her jaw still wired shut from injuries inflicted by the man Christina had brought into their lives. That depends entirely on your choices from this point forward, Christina. Choose wisely. Chapter 8, Total War. Christina Gates sat in her empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of belongings she'd removed from the family home, watching news reports about Bill Hogan's arrest. The federal charges were extensive: witness intimidation, conspiracy, fraud, and, most damaging, a new charge of aggravated assault on a minor based on Leah's injuries. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Reporters, lawyers, social services, and creditors were all trying to reach her. The carefully constructed new life she'd built with Bill was collapsing faster than she could process. But the call that terrified her most was the one from Therese Jacobs, her divorce attorney. Christina, we have a problem. A big problem. Bigger than my fiancé being arrested on federal charges? Much bigger. The custody case has been transferred to federal court because of the witness intimidation charges. Your husband's legal team has filed motions alleging that you were complicit in the conspiracy to deprive him of his parental rights. Christina felt her blood turn to ice. What does that mean? It means they're not just fighting for custody of Leah. They're building a case for criminal charges against you. Conspiracy to commit parental kidnapping, filing false police reports, perjury in federal court. That's impossible. I never. Christina, they have documentation. Emails between you and Bill discussing how to handle Jeremy. Text messages about getting restraining orders based on fabricated threats. Phone records showing coordination with your sister to downgrade the domestic violence charges. The room seemed to spin around Christina. Everything she'd done to protect her new relationship was being used as evidence of a criminal conspiracy. There's more, Therese continued. Jeremy's legal team has filed for emergency custody based on what they're calling an imminent threat to the child's safety. They're arguing that you knowingly placed Leah in danger by maintaining a relationship with a violent felon. He wasn't a felon when I... Christina, they have financial records showing that Bill has been under federal investigation for over a year. They're claiming you should have known about his criminal activities and chose to ignore them to protect your relationship. Christina disconnected the call and immediately dialed Jeremy's number. Hello, Christina. Jeremy, please. We need to talk. I'm listening. The lawyers are saying you're trying to have me arrested. That can't be true. I'm Leah's mother. Christina, you were Leah's mother when you allowed a violent criminal to live in her house. You were her mother when you helped him plan to frame me as an unstable threat. You were her mother when you chose to protect him instead of her after he broke her jaw. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now you're experiencing the consequences of those choices. Christina began crying. What do you want from me? I'll do anything. I want you to understand something very clearly. This isn't about punishment or revenge. This is about ensuring that my daughter is never again placed in danger by someone who claims to love her. I do love her. She's my daughter too. Then prove it. Sign the custody transfer papers. Admit in court that you made errors in judgment that endangered Leah's safety. Cooperate fully with federal investigators. And if I do that, the criminal charges will be dropped. Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. Christina, I can't make that promise. The federal prosecutors make their own decisions based on the evidence. But I can tell you that your cooperation would be viewed favorably. Jeremy, I'm scared. You should be scared. You should have been scared when you allowed a violent man around our daughter. Fear might have prevented this entire situation. What about us? What about our marriage? Jeremy's laugh was cold and bitter. Our marriage ended the moment you chose another man over your family. The paperwork is just a formality. I never meant for any of this to happen. Intent is irrelevant. Results are what matter. And the result is that my daughter was assaulted by a man you brought into her life. Christina could hear the finality in his voice. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender demand. If I sign the papers, if I cooperate, will I be able to see Leah? That will depend on several factors. Your level of cooperation with federal investigators. Your willingness to undergo psychological evaluation and parenting classes. Your ability to demonstrate that you can prioritize Leah's safety over your own desires. Supervised visitation? Maybe. Eventually. If you earn it. Christina felt her world shrinking to a single choice. Fight Jeremy in federal court and risk prison, or surrender completely and hope for eventual mercy. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. After that, my offer expires and you deal with the federal prosecutors on your own. Jeremy disconnected the call and immediately contacted Agent Cooper. Cooper, what's the status on the broader investigation? Arthur Norris rolled on everyone. We've got indictments coming down on 12 city officials, 8 contractors, and 3 judges. Your friend Bill was just the tip of the iceberg. And G. Mays, singing like a canary. His operation was bigger than we thought. He's been manufacturing evidence and intimidating witnesses in family court cases across 3 states. We're looking at potentially hundreds of convictions that need to be reviewed. Jeremy felt a deep satisfaction. The corruption that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah was being completely eradicated. Cooper, I need one more favor. Name it. I want Christina offered a cooperation agreement. Full immunity in exchange for complete cooperation and voluntary surrender of custody. Jeremy, after what she put you and Leah through, this isn't about revenge. It's about protecting my daughter. If Christina cooperates, she admits her mistakes publicly, which protects Leah from future manipulation. If she fights, the court battle could drag on for years. And you want this over quickly. I want this over permanently. The next morning, Jeremy sat in his lawyer's office reviewing the final custody transfer documents. Beside him, Leah played quietly with her tablet, her jaw finally freed from the wires but still tender. Daddy, will I still be able to see Mommy sometimes? Jeremy looked at his daughter, his brave, intelligent daughter who had endured so much because of adult failures, and felt his resolve strengthen. Maybe Princess. That will depend on whether Mommy can learn to make better choices. I hope she can. I still love her, even though she made bad decisions. Jeremy hugged his daughter close, marveling at her capacity for forgiveness. It was a capacity he'd lost somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, and he had no desire to recover it. Some betrayals were unforgivable. Some mistakes had permanent consequences. And Jeremy Gates never forgot and never forgave. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. 6 months later, Jeremy stood in the kitchen of his new house, a secure, private property 30 miles outside Charlotte, watching Leah help Blake prepare Sunday dinner. His daughter's jaw had healed completely, though she still unconsciously touched it when she was nervous. The physical scars were gone, but Jeremy knew the emotional ones would take longer to fade. Christina had signed the custody transfer papers, cooperated with federal investigators, and received a suspended sentence in exchange for her testimony against the broader corruption network. She was currently living in a supervised halfway house, attending court-ordered therapy sessions, and working in a non-profit organization as part of her community service. She wrote letters to Leah every week. Jeremy read each one carefully before deciding whether to pass them along. Most were appropriate expressions of love and regret. Some were manipulative attempts to shift blame or generate sympathy. Those letters went directly into the shredder. Bill Hogan had received 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. His construction company had been dissolved, its assets seized to pay restitution to the victims of his various crimes. The gambling debts had been satisfied through bankruptcy proceedings, though Hubert Brock's organization had made it clear that Bill's physical safety in prison was not guaranteed. Arthur Norris was serving 12 years and had been ordered to pay back $17 million in stolen federal funds. Gene Mays received 30 years for his witness intimidation operation, and Jeff Blackburn was cooperating with ongoing investigations into defense contractor corruption in exchange for a reduced sentence. Detective Rosa Wallace had been fired from the police department and was facing her own criminal charges for evidence tampering and accepting bribes. The entire corrupt network that had enabled Bill's assault on Leah had been systematically destroyed. Jeremy's phone buzzed with a text message from Christina. "Please, just one supervised visit. I haven't seen her in 6 months. I've completed all my court requirements." He showed the message to Leah, who was now 13 and mature beyond her years. "What do you think, princess?" Leah considered carefully before responding. "I miss her, Daddy, but I'm also scared. What if she tries to take me away again?" "She can't take you away. Ever. The custody transfer is permanent, and she has no legal rights to challenge it. Then, maybe we could see her for a little while. Somewhere safe." Jeremy nodded. Despite everything Christina had done, she was still Leah's mother, and Leah deserved the opportunity to maintain some relationship with her if she chose to. "I'll arrange something supervised and public. But Leah, I need you to understand that this doesn't mean Mommy is coming back into our lives in any significant way. I understand, Daddy. You're my family now. You and Uncle Blake and Uncle Sam and everyone who protects us." Jeremy felt a surge of pride. His daughter had learned to distinguish between people who truly cared about her welfare and those who claimed to care while acting in their own interests. That afternoon, Jeremy received an unexpected visitor. Sam arrived with a woman Jeremy didn't recognize, attractive, professional, probably in her late 30s. "Kate, I'd like you to meet Dr. Allison Klein. She's a trauma counselor who works with military families." Jeremy shook Allison's hand, immediately noting the confident grip and direct eye contact. "Dr. Klein, Mr. Gates, I've heard a lot about you from Sam and Blake. I wanted to talk with you about Leah's long-term emotional recovery." They sat on Jeremy's back deck while Leah played with Blake's dog in the yard. Allison observed Leah carefully before speaking. "She's remarkably resilient, but she's also learned to be hyper-vigilant about adult emotions and motivations. That's a survival mechanism, but it can be exhausting for a child. What are you recommending?" "Continued stability, consistent boundaries, and help processing the betrayal by trusted adults. Children who experience what Leah experienced often struggle with trust issues and emotional regulation." Jeremy watched his daughter playing, noting the way she periodically glanced back to ensure he was still there. "She's already in therapy with a specialist who understands trauma in military families." "Good. But I'm also concerned about you, Mr. Gates. You've been through your own trauma, the betrayal by your wife, the assault on your daughter, the necessity of taking extreme measures to protect your family. I'm fine. Allison smiled slightly. With respect, sir, no one is fine after what you've been through. Your response was necessary and effective, but it came at a psychological cost. Jeremy considered her words. Since Christina's betrayal, he'd felt something cold and permanent settle into his chest. He found it difficult to trust anyone outside his military family. He analyzed every interaction for potential threats or deceptions. He'd become hypervigilant in the same way he'd accused Leah of being. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you've spent so much energy protecting Leah that you haven't processed your own trauma. And eventually, that unprocessed trauma will affect your ability to parent effectively. That evening, after Allison left and Leah was asleep, Jeremy sat on his deck with Blake, sharing a beer and watching the stars. She's right, Blake said, about the therapy thing. I don't need therapy. I need my daughter to be safe and happy. Gate, when's the last time you thought about dating? About building a relationship with someone? Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. I can't trust anyone with that kind of access to Leah. Anyone I let into our lives becomes a potential threat to her safety. That's not healthy, brother. For you or for her. It's realistic. Christina convinced me she loved our family, and then she brought a violent criminal into our home. I trusted her completely, and she used that trust to endanger the most important thing in my life. So, you're never going to trust anyone again? I'm never going to give anyone the opportunity to hurt Leah again. Blake nodded, understanding the logic, even if he disagreed with the conclusion. What about forgiveness, Gate? Christina made terrible choices, but she's trying to make amends. Don't you think there's value in modeling forgiveness for Leah? Jeremy turned to look at his friend, his expression harder than stone. Blake, Christina allowed a violent man to assault my daughter and then tried to use the legal system to prevent me from protecting her. Those actions had consequences that can't be undone. Leah will always carry the memory of that assault. She'll always wonder if the people who claim to love her might betray her. But, no buts. Some actions are unforgivable. Some betrayals are permanent. I will ensure that Leah has the opportunity to maintain a relationship with her mother if she chooses, but I will never forgive Christina, and I will never trust her. And Bill. Jeremy's smile was arctic. Bill will serve every day of his sentence, assuming he survives it. And if he ever gets out, he'll discover that I have a very long memory and unlimited patience. Blake understood that the conversation was over. Jeremy Gates had made his decisions about forgiveness and trust, and those decisions were as permanent as carved stone. As the months turned to years, Jeremy built a new life with Leah at its center. They traveled together, trained together, learned together. She grew into a confident, intelligent young woman who understood the difference between genuine protection and controlling behavior. Christina was eventually allowed supervised visits, which she treasured and never took for granted. She never asked for more than Jeremy was willing to give, understanding that her relationship with her daughter existed entirely at his discretion. Bill Hogan died in federal prison during his 4th year of incarceration. The official cause was listed as complications from injuries sustained during a fight with other inmates. Jeremy felt no satisfaction at the news, only a sense of complete closure. On Leah's 18th birthday, she asked Jeremy about his philosophy on forgiveness. Daddy, don't you think holding on to anger hurts you more than it hurts the people who wronged you? Jeremy considered the question carefully before responding. Princess, anger isn't what I carry. What I carry is clarity. I understand that some people will hurt others for their own benefit, and I refuse to pretend otherwise. That clarity has kept you safe for the past 6 years. But what about mercy?